Good afternoon. Happy Bughouse 2020. My name is Elizabeth Cummings. I'm the Public Programs Manager at the Newberry Library. Thank you for joining us for the 2020 Bughouse Square event. This year, Bughouse Square, a historic epicenter of speechifying in Chicago, is wherever you are. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, we cannot gather together in Washington Square Park or Bughouse Square, as we've done in past years. Thanks to our staff at the Newberry and our partners at the Society of Smallness, GCE Lab School, and the Washington Square Park Advisory Council, Bughouse 2020 has been transformed into a virtual experience, and you're here for it. This afternoon, we'll have the privilege to learn about the history of Bughouse Square and see performances of historical songs from our archives reimagined by the members of the musical group Mosaic Soul Ensemble. We'll also have a very current discussion about the theme of this year's Bughouse Square debates, voting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Wilson. I also work in public programs at the Newberry Library, and along with Elizabeth, have been the primary organizer of Bughouse 2020. Thank you again and welcome. Through the theme of voting and the concept of enfranchisement more broadly, we hope to spark discussion around the questions of who gets to vote, how do we vote, and why. These questions are especially critical this year, not only because of the upcoming presidential election, but also because this year, on August 26th, to be precise, is the 100th anniversary of the adoption of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. As hugely consequential as this achievement was, we are now more than ever aware of how the right to vote continues to be withheld or denied to so many in the United States today, especially to Black, Latino, and Indigenous Americans. Approximately 1 in 13 Black Americans are disenfranchised because of past convictions. Felony convictions have disenfranchised over 6 million Americans, up from 1 million in the 1970s, alongside the grotesque rise of the prison populations, which overwhelmingly house people of color. In addition, Trump and the GOP continue their campaign of voter suppression, emphasizing the risk of voter fraud when study after study shows how rarely voter fraud actually occurs. Voter suppression is all too often the foundation of the Republican electoral strategy. My home state of Texas last year had the dubious distinction of shutting down the most polling places in the country, predominantly in areas that are majority Black and Latino. The closure of polling places throughout the country, as well as the often convoluted process of registering to vote, contributes to the fact that only around 60% of Americans show up to vote in presidential elections, and the number is far less for local elections. So as much as today we would like to encourage people to register to vote, to support local organizations that work towards restoring and maintaining voting rights and civil liberties, we also acknowledge how very fraught voting is for so many people. We hope that this program will inspire you to take a critical look at the state of voting rights and enfranchisement today. There will be 2 soapboxes exploring these and other issues, a youth soapbox hosted by the GCE Lab School, and an open soapbox facilitated by Jorge Mujica and Dud Lawson as MCs. Before I turn things over, I want to also take the opportunity to thank the 2020 Bughouse Committee and the work they have done in bringing this event to a virtual platform. We are grateful to the tireless efforts of Newberry staff members across multiple departments, as well as the members of the Society of Smallness and the GCE Lab School for helping us pull this off. I scrolled through my notes and lost my place, I'm sorry. But anyway, now I'm going to turn things over to Paul DURICA, get off my own soapbox. Paul DURICA is Director of Exhibitions at the Newberry, and he's going to be discussing some of the historical origins of Bughouse Square. Thank you again.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Paul. Here you go, Paul. I'm gonna let you share the screen.
All right. Thank you, Sarah and Elizabeth. All right. Let's pray for the best. Okay. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I wish that we could be in the park itself, but this is the next best thing. As Sarah said, I'm going to provide a sort of brief history of Washington Square, which is the oldest free speech space in the city of Chicago. So let's start our story in October of 1871. You might recall a pretty big thing happened in that month. And that, of course, was the Great Chicago Fire, which destroyed 3/4 of the city. Now, in the path of that fire, pretty much everything was destroyed except for a handful of structures. Most Chicagoans know that the water tower survived, but also not too far from it, the mansion of Mahlon D. Ogden also withstood the flames. Now, Mahlon D. Ogden was originally from the East Coast. He was the brother of the first mayor of Chicago, William Butler Ogden. He himself was a successful attorney and later judge. But how did his house manage to survive the conflagration while so many others were completely destroyed? Well, the legend goes is that when he saw the flames approaching, Mahlon got his whole household together and they basically took every piece of cloth, every linen, the rugs, the carpets, and so forth, soaked them in water and draped them on the exterior of the structure so that any stray sparks that might reach it, right, wouldn't take root. But historians also believe that Ogden benefited from having open space directly to the south of his home. And that space was Washington Square, a park. Now, Washington Square, the land on which it stands now, was deeded to the city in September of 1842 by Misters Fitch, Bushnell, and Butler, working together under the rather imaginative name of the American Land Company. And they gave this parcel of land to the city of Chicago, which had only incorporated a handful of years before in 1837, with the understanding that it would be a public space. And as you look at the historical record over the course of the 19th century, after the fire, all the way leading up through the start of the 20th century, what you find in reference to Washington Square is fairly expected. This, after the fire and both before it, was a fairly fashionable, affluent neighborhood. And so when Washington Square appears in local papers, it's usually about matters around like beautification. I can't tell you how many different fountains existed between 1870 and 1906. There were a lot. They seemed like they were constantly put in place and then taken down based on the protests of local residents. Children also loved the park, and at one point there was a play structure there as well. But one article that I found from 1896, I think connects to a story that will be familiar to most Chicagoans, and that has to deal with public craft. And I thought this one was quite interesting. So there was a gentleman who worked for the city of Chicago by the name of Balmer, who was in charge of basically construction and streets and sanitation projects. And he generously donated a bunch of dirt to Washington Square to kind of aid in one of the various beautification projects. But as it turned out, that dirt came from a property that Balmer himself owned, which was north of the park, and he was using city workers to basically dig out a cellar and a basement for the home that he planned to build and billing it all to the city. And this is a scandal that would also ensnare a future mayor of Chicago, Fred Busey. Now, a decade after the Balmer scandal in 1896, the then alderman in the area that covered Washington Square Park, Robert R. McCormick, later to become a colonel, later to become the publisher of the Chicago Tribune, donated his salary to build a fountain there. And that fountain, which was erected in 1906, would last all the way through to the present. But by 1906, Washington Square had taken on a new name. And that's the name by which most Chicagoans know today, the name that lends itself to today's event, and that is Bughouse Square. Now, Bughouse is slang for a mental institution. And the area got this name because by the end of the 19th century and stretching all the way through the end of the 1950s, this was the space in the city of Chicago where anyone could get up on a soapbox and hold forth on whatever topics they were passionate about. This is a place where you could go as an average Chicagoan to not only improve your education, perhaps questionably, but also to get some free entertainment as well. And it was particularly popular in the spring and summer and early fall months. Its real high point was over the 19-teens, 20s, and 30s, and it was at this time where you would see some of the legendary soapbox speakers. These included figures like the Sir Fessor Maflu Seklu. If I trip on that name a little bit, purportedly it was an anagram of his actual birth name, although no one actually figured out what his actual birth name was that it was an anagram of. Now, he was the Sir Fessor because he considers himself of a higher pedigree than a mere professor, and he would hold forth on a whole range of topics, things like the Rhapsody of Laughter and how to survive on a diet of peanuts. Other popular soapbox speakers included the Norwegian machinist E.P. Triphammer Johnson, who would give long talks on the plays of Ibsen and Strindberg. He always drew a fairly large crowd by most accounts, but that was because he had the genius idea of always setting up his soapbox near the water fountain, which on hot summer days, of course, drew a crowd to it. And there were the Sheridan brothers, the twin brothers who are mentioned in that newspaper headline that I have down at the bottom, Jim and Jack Sheridan. They would hold forth on a whole range of topics, socialism, Freudianism, you name it. Jimmy Sheridan would stay a soapbox speaker all the way from the late 1920s until his death in the early 1970s. He also worked for a long time as a dishwasher at the popular restaurant Ricardo's. But, you know, mixed in with these kind of colorful, sort of eccentric figures were really kind of significant, you know, historical individuals as well. On an average evening in Washington Square Park, you might see Lucy Parsons give a talk. Now, Lucy Parsons was the widow of Albert Parsons, one of the men who had been executed in connection with the bombing in Haymarket Square. But her entire life, she was a very active activist herself. Her career stretched all the way from the 1870s until her death in 1942. She's credited being with one of the people who pioneered the strategy of the sit-down strike, and also was one of the founders of the Industrial Workers of the World in 1905. Other people that you might see would be a young poet by the name of Kenneth Rexroth. Rexroth started coming to Bughouse Square while he was still a teenager, and he would share some of his first poems with the crowds there. And he would later move on to the West Coast and become a major inspiration for the Beat movement. And then, you know, other figures as well, Eugene Debs, Clarence Darrow, you name it, would show up and give talks before a really mixed and interesting and generally combative crowd at Bughouse Square. But, you know, we're in a unique moment today, and that we're not actually in the square on soapboxes giving our talks, but rather I'm doing it virtually. And the soapboxers of the teens and 20s faced their own challenges, mainly the weather. So what did they do when the weather grew cold or when it was a particularly rainy day? Well, they went a little bit off the park, along the Dearborn side, down an alley called Tucker. And they would be guided by a green light, and that green light would lead them to a carriage house. And the door of the carriage house would be painted a bright orange. And written on it would be the words, which you can see behind me, "Step high, stoop low, leave your dignity outside." And those soapbox speakers would have arrived at the Dill Pickle Club. The Dill Pickle Club was the premier bohemian night spot in the city of Chicago, and I am holding the doorknob to the actual club. This was a place that would be visited by a whole range of speakers. One night you might go there and see Albert Michelson, professor of physics at the University of Chicago and a Nobel Prize winner. Another evening, Mae West might be performing a scene from her subtly titled play, Sex. Or go there on another night and you might see the legendary con artist Yellow Kid Weil, talk about his various techniques to fleece individuals. It was also a place where a lot of people that today we call members of the Chicago literary Renaissance convened. These were people like the writer Sherwood Anderson, best remembered for his collection Winesburg, Ohio, the poet Carl Sandburg, who of course wrote the famous poem Chicago, which was published in Poetry Magazine in 1914, and the journalist turned playwright turned screenwriter Ben Hecht, whose very first play, Dregs, was performed on stage at the Dill Pickle Club. You can see here a sort of taste of what you might encounter at the Dill Pickle on a given night. I've kind of found this headline really wonderful because it gives you a sense of the spirit. There was a lecture by several young women on how a man makes love, which apparently nearly caused a poet to fall out the window. So the Dill Pickle Club was part of a much larger neighborhood at that time in the teens and 20s known as Tower Town, which took its name from the Chicago Water Tower. And there were several kind of like cafes, public forums, bookstores, and other things catering to a bohemian population. By this point in time, the neighborhood surrounding Bughouse Square and the Newberry had declined a little bit. And a lot of the mansions that had been built there had been carved up into rooming houses, and a lot of the carriage houses become some of these venues, the Dill Pickle Club being one of them. But the space was never without its own controversies. And then that's always, when you're going to open up a space and make it accessible to all, there might be some sort of dangers and challenges that emerge. So over the course of time, particularly as we move past the Second World War into the 1950s, there's more sort of like troubling incidents occurring at Bughouse Square. Two of the ones that I have reported here actually happened in the 30s. There was a riot in Bughouse Square that happened in 1934 that actually resulted in some shots being fired and some people being injured, which drew unwanted attention to the space. But then a slightly more humorous article about a movable restaurant that suffered in a riot of peanut dispensers. Long story short, there used to be basically what was in the parlance of the time called a lunch wagon. Today we would call a food truck that believed it had an exclusive license to the space. And there were other just individual vendors who were selling peanuts. The owner of this food truck did not appreciate that and called the police a couple of different times. And so eventually the rogue peanut dispensers decided to take actions into their own hands and overturn the food truck. And lastly, there's the article about the girl reporter who was beaten and left in the snowbank. This was after she was attempting to expose some corruption in different nightclubs and other bars surrounding the Bughouse Square. Her name was Patricia Bronte, and she would go on to write one of the more interesting books about Chicago, a sort of combination true crime account and cookbook known as Vittles and Vice. As I mentioned earlier, Bughouse Square's heyday was really the sort of teens, 20s, and 30s. By the 1950s, the crowd had dwindled, as had the range of speakers who were showing up in it. It had become a tourist attraction, and you might get some buses on the weekend of the curious kind of dropping by to see what was happening, but it didn't have that spark and vitality that it once did. A lot of the longtime speakers blamed television, of all things, for kind of cutting down on the sort of interest in this sort of civic interaction. In his memoir from 1973, Talking to Myself, the radio host and noted oral historian Studs Terkel, who had started going to Bughouse Square in 1926, he lived not that far away. His family owned a boarding house at the corner of Wells and Grand. And he recalls, meeting people like Lucy Parsons at Bughouse Square, which had a profound impact on his life. But in his memoir, Talking to Myself from 1973, Terkel describes being in the square in the early 70s and how, the park was still there, but, there are no soapboxes, there are no speakers, there are no crowds. Instead, what he sees are lots of lonely, particularly young people sitting on the benches, yearning to kind of share what they're thinking about, to create some sort of sense of community, but not having that opportunity. But things were going to change in the not too distant future. Now, I didn't want to end this kind of first little interlude on a downbeat note, so I wanted to draw attention to one part of Bughouse Square's history that has largely been obscured, but that has, in my opinion, a real significance. And so you have to go back to June 27th, 1970. A year prior, the Stonewall riots in New York had kind of kicked off the sort of gay rights movement, not just in New York, but across the country. And in the following year, the first sort of gay rights march in the city of Chicago left from Bughouse Square and went towards City Hall. It eventually ended, as this article says, in front of the Chicago Picasso. This march would evolve over time into Pride as we know it today. And this article that I have reproduced here in full from the Chicago Tribune, I wanted to share because you can see how short it is, right? It's just a brief, 3-paragraph article. And yet what would grow out of this would have such a kind of profound impact on the character and culture of the city. And I think that's one thing that's truly special about Bughouse Square, is that its influence has kind of stretched for over the course of a century. And it still has a lot to contribute to the culture of Chicago today. So with that, I'm going to end our first interlude and hand things back to Sarah and Elizabeth, or maybe to Kate, who's going to introduce our musical interlude.
Yes, Kate is going to do the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Harriman. I also work in the Public Engagement Department at the Newberry, and I'm stepping in to introduce the next segment of our program. Having to go virtual for an event that is so closely tied to boisterous festivity in the park, we wanted to bring some music to Bughouse 2020. This is the first of 3 performances based on early 20th century sheet music housed at the Newberry in the Franklin and Penelope Rosemont collection of Industrial Workers of the World publications and ephemera, the bulk of which dates from 1905 to 1935. The collection includes IWW pamphlets, flyers, periodicals, books, convention minutes and proceedings, stickers, official documents, and of course, songbooks. IWW organizers played a key role in the Bughouse Square debates, and although we aren't in Washington Square Park this year, we wanted to bring the park to you through these songs. Recorded in Washington Square Park this week by Philip Armstrong and Greg Woods, the founders and co-directors of Mosaic Soul Ensemble, a professional vocal ensemble highlighting spiritual music and based in Chicago. These local musicians chose 3 union songs that highlight the political issues raised by IWW that still ring true today. First up is the song, "We Have Fed You All for 1,000 Years." The lyrics are credited to an unknown proletarian and set to music by Rudolf von Liebig. This song would have been included in the Little Red Songbook that a union member would receive upon joining IWW. Please enjoy this performance.
We have fed you all for 1,000 years, and you held us still unfed. For there's never a dollar of all your wealth but marks the workers dead. We have yielded our best and give you rest, and you lie on a crimson wool. Then if blood be the price of all your wealth, good God, we have paid it full. There is never a mind blown skyward now, but we're buried alive for you. There's never a wreck drift shoreward now, but we are your ghastly crew. Oh, reckon our dead by the forges red and the factories where we spin. If blood be the price of your cursed breath, good God, we have paid it in. We have fed you all for 1,000 years. For that we are doomed, you know, from the days when you chained us in your fields to the strike of a week ago. You have eaten our lives and our babies and wives, and we're told it's your legal share. But if blood be the price of your lawful wealth, good God, we have bought it back.
Thank you, Mosaic, for that amazing performance and giving us a glimpse of our beloved park. Next up, we've got Rick KOGAN, a longtime Chicago journalist and radio personality and Bughouse Square aficionado, pardon me for the camera just then, who will join Paul DURICA, who we just saw, our Newberry Director of Exhibitions, to discuss the late 20th century revival of Bughouse Square as a place for free speech. Paul, I'll let you take it away and I'll make sure you've got Rick in here.
Okay.
All right, Rick, why don't you start your video?
Unmuted. Can
Okay.
you
There
hear?
you are.
You simply can't see me. Yeah, that was a lovely introductory piece, Paul. But
Thank you.
I don't care if I'm seen or not. Well, here, start my video. I got to tell you, during this entire thing, I'm thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, if Studs wasn't already dead, this would have killed him. This would have killed him. Studs, who was famously could barely use a tape recorder. He was not technologically savvy, but I would just think he would get such a kick out of this whole thing, but it would probably put him under. How are you? Good to be here again.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today
sure.
and for being part of this. So I thought you would be the perfect person to sit down with and talk about kind of
Studs.
how Bughouse Studs and how Bughouse came back. Because as I mentioned, in the early 70s, Studs is kind of lamenting the sort of state of Bughouse Square. And although there would be a couple attempts to kind of bring it back, it really wouldn't be until 1986 that the Newberry, working with him.
Arthur Weinberg and his wife,
right?
Really, Studs was a joyful, wonderful, incredibly intelligent guy, but organizationally he lacked a certain something that Art Weinberg and his wife, Art, who was a writer, lawyer. He did write. I had it down here. I don't remember what his book was, but he wrote a book that was. He was a good writer. So look up Arthur Weinberg. He and Lila hosted it for the first few years, and then Studs, who was always there for the debates, then took it over. And I think that's when it really sort of kicked into, Studs being Studs and Studs being a name. It really kicked into another kind of realm. What you have to remember, as I'm sure you do, Paul, in the, for all of its credit for helping and empowering the gay community here, it was for a time a real dark kind of gay cruising spot. And in being such, it also attracted people who would take advantage of the people cruising the park. There were a number of robberies there. And it is speculated that the serial killer, John Wayne Gacy, came there to hunt, which gives it, an unbelievably kind of dark part of its history until Weinberg and Studs kind of elevated it. And I think a lot of it too was the, ritzier buildings that were built around it. And as you know, when it was first built, it was not there are no such things as altruistic builders. They built the park in order to attract people to buy the homes that they were building around the park.
Right.
And I think it's wonderful that it does have that kind of colorful history. And Studs, you quoted something Studs said about it in Touch and Go, one of his later books. He wrote about Bughouse Square. I doubt whether I learned very much at the park. One thing I know, and this is so wonderfully Studs, I delighted in it. Perhaps none of it made any sense, save for one kind. Now I'm dripping into my Studs impersonation. Perhaps none of it made any sense at all, save for one kind, a sense of life. And that's why I think it was a very important place to Studs, a bit to my father too, who was Studs' probably first introduced me to the park when I was a kid. But I remember well those sort of dark and scary years. We actually used to some of us in high school, it was a big dare to run across the park diagonally. And people would say, you're going to get killed in there. You're going to get killed in there. And so I'd hate to ignore that part of it too. Right. It makes it a much more, as you know, I mean, this whole city is light and dark and good and bad. But then when Studs took it over, I think that's when the crowd really started to sort of bulk up. I mean, Studs was not tweeting about it or putting it on Facebook, but just having Studs there, I think, is what really elevated it for about, I guess it's been about a good dozen, maybe 15 years that he did it. And then I took over the hosting tours when he was last year of his life, which was 2008. He was just too frail and to do it, but I know that he adored it. And, it literally was one of the foundations of his life. He went there, I don't know if it inspired him to listen, one of the great listeners, but I think that was a huge part of it. Don't you, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to look at those early years in the late 80s to the early 90s. And I think he was also able to get a really interesting range of speakers. I mean, there were some pretty heavy hitters in that period, right? Aldermen, state reps, judges, people connected to the Bar Association, the ACLU. I mean, it was like really kind of, pretty rich civic debate, but it also seemed like a lot of the people that he brought in had similar memories of what Bughouse Square had been.
I think you're right. I think there are very few people, it goes without saying, very few people who are alive now or who attend the Bughouse Square debates now who have any kind of memory of that place from the heyday. And it really, I wish there were something, someone had cataloged it, maybe even, with film or something, because it does sound, it sounds amazing.
Right.
It sounds amazing. I don't know if it'd be inspirational to me, but it certainly sounds amazing. I remember even Seth was so particular about this place that when, God, it must be 10, 15 years ago, when the city was going to remodel the park. Remember that? Build a fence, and Studs was just railing in the papers about a fence there, keep people out. He doesn't want it there. When it finally was built, it's sort of relatively short, and it's not a barrier to it. And he kind of warmed to it. And indeed, that's where he's buried, as you well know. That's the highlight of my hosting tours. I will mention, I always do and talk about Studs when I'm hosting this thing, talking about the importance of human interaction and differing opinions, which, boy, does that vanish these days. But because you have to switch channels to get a differing opinion. You can listen to what you want, but you got to switch channels to get a different opinion. And Studs, when he died, he had his wife Ida died a few years before him. Ida, his wife of 60 some years, and he had her ashes in a little urn in his house next to daisies, her favorite flower that he would buy every day or have delivered every day. And I was over there one day because my father had died, Studs' his best friend, and I had become sort of a surrogate son. And also, Studs never drove. So in his later years, when everybody in the world wanted Studs to come speak somewhere, here's the best one. He calls me one day, he goes, "Rick, what are you doing Friday?" I go, I don't know, Studs, what do you need? He goes, you gotta drive me someplace. I go, where? I gotta speak at a book event in Highland Park. Okay. Whose house? I don't remember. Here's your number. So I called this woman. I said, "Hi, this is Rick KOGAN. Studs has asked me to drive to your event. Could you give me the details of your event?" "Well, Mr. KOGAN, it's 4 members of my book club, and we're meeting at my house. And Mr. Turco was nice enough to say that he would come and talk to us." I'm going, Jesus, Studs is pushing 90 at this point. And we did do it, but I told him, that's it. Said, you can't say yes to every single person. So when Ida died, had the daisies there, and that is about one of the times he told me, he said, "Rick, when I check out," and as an old hotel kid, he used that euphemism for dying. He never said die, never said death, never said dying. Checking out, checked out, checking in. So he said, Rick, you got to do me a favor when I die. You got to take my ashes and you mix them with Ida's ashes. And I want to be buried in Bughouse Square. And I said, being not as free thinking as Studs, I said, Studs, you know, that's against the law. And he thought for a moment and he said, okay, then let them sue us. Let them sue us. And they're buried. It was a lovely spring. It's his birthday in 2009, the year after he died, on Halloween. And there were about 5 of us there, and without much ceremony at all, we buried him. The tree is near the Dearborn Street side, up a little path. And it's amazing, Paul, that whenever I host the event, there, you have no idea of the vast number of people who want to see where he is. And they're appalled that there's no plaque there. And I go, well, you know, that's Studs too. That's Studs too. And I really think that is some indication of how meaningful that park was to him.
Right. Well, you'd often, tell the story about meeting figures like Lucy Parsons. And I think one of the things that's amazing about both that space, but the city of Chicago, is a sense of continuity. So, you've had it be over a century, right, as a free speech space, but the way different figures encounter one another and they kind of carry things forward. And for, Studs to kind of take up that legacy and extend it into the 21st century.
Well, really, I also think part of it was, in addition to Lucy Parsons and Eugene Debs and Sandberg and some luminaries who were used to speaking in public and who were kind of cogent and intelligent, I think Studs got this ability to listen to when Studs was walking around the city, people would stop him all the time and just ramble at him. And he saw a lot of lunatics there. I found something that I think you'll like, and I hope the viewers like too. I know you know this book. The Gold Coast and the Slum was a 1929 sociological study of the Near North Side by Harvey Warren Zorba. And here's what he wrote. Here's how he described, it's beautiful. He wrote, quote, by day, its benches are filled with men reading newspapers, talking, or just sitting in the sun. But at night, crowded along its curbstones are gathered groups of men, often as many as 100 in a group, listening to the impassioned pleas of the soapbox orator, the propagandist, and the agitator. This is the best line, all their arguments come down to one or the other of 2 propositions. The economic system is all wrong, or there is no God. I love that description. Studs would have been 17 years old at that in 1929, and he got it. He totally got it.
Let's talk briefly about your time as the host and the kind of master of ceremonies of Bughouse Square. Yeah. You took over for Studs.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
And kind of looking back over the years, do any particular speakers stand out or moments?
Well, they frankly, one of the reasons I keep doing this is certainly, it's not for any financial remuneration. There isn't any. It's to see some old friends of that crowd. But also, I must tell you, every single year I have been enlightened, no more so than at least 10 years ago. It was the main debate. The main debate was Lincoln Douglas. And of course, like everybody in the world, I go, oh yeah, I've read those. I've read the Lincoln Douglas debates. I know all about that. And there were 2 guys named Michael Krebs played Lincoln and Larry Dimer played Douglas. And they just did one of the debates or a portion of one of the debates. It was so compelling to me that I then went back and found all 7 debates and read them all. And obviously I never read them before. And it was terribly, terribly enlightening. And that's when you asked me that, so we may talk about your favorite memories, right? That is certainly one of them because it informed my life beyond Bughouse Square and the debates. And it's always interesting to see, I don't know if we're doing it today, who wins the Dill Pickle Award, because I think all of you at the Newberry, How's David Spadafora, by the way? Anybody here from good old David down golf retirement? And now Danny Green's there, which is a nice transition. But I think that I have gotten a great deal of value out of it. Even, I can't hear every debater walking, but I go and drift in from soapbox to soapbox, especially when they get loud with hecklers. I go, wow, what is that guy talking about? And one year it was it was about allowing dogs in restaurants. And I thought, well, there's an issue of the day. But some of it is very trivial, and some of it is incredibly sincere, and almost all of it is passionate. Because there is no, were you to charge entry fees and then give $100 rewards, you get a much different crowd. But I think the people who generally, and I'm hoping next year we can do it outside, are incredibly passionate about it all and about whatever their cause is. I have rarely, there've been a couple jokesters along the way, a couple of very self-aggrandizing, gee, do I like to hear myself speak kind of characters, but generally it is substantive. And I think that's the great joy of it for me. And I think it is for many of the people who go there too. They see the list of speakers, and none of the speakers are famous, and topics, and they are drawn to them, and they can flit around too. So I am so hoping, this is a real interesting experiment for me. And I'm so hoping that we can do it live and in person. And I will be happy to show all of you people watching where Studs and Ida are buried. It's it was just a scraggly little tree when they were buried there. And now it's grown into a beautiful, beautiful tree. So it's a special thing to be part of the Bughouse Square debates.
Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm looking forward to when we can actually be back in the park and do it live again.
Kidding. No
I also
kidding.
wanted to thank you too for all the great reporting you've been doing in the midst of this crisis, talking about kind of culture and community within the city. I got to see that puppet show that you wrote about not that long ago at Lakeview.
Which one?
That was really amazing. The puppets, the former zookeeper.
Astonishing. Astonishing. Yeah. I wish I could tell people the address, but too many people show up, and then he'd get arrested.
That's right. But that's very kind of in the spirit of Bughouse. So thank you.
Thanks. That means a lot to me too. Me too. You take care, and all my other pals at the Newberry take care, and all you people who I hope will be at the debates next year, because I'm hopeful. Hope dies last. That's something Stud always said. Hope dies last. So I'll be watching.
Thanks, Rick. Take care.
You bet.
Safe. Now I'll hand things back to Elizabeth and Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks, Rick. It was nice to see you again. I hope you're doing well.
I had COVID.
Did you? Oh boy.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I'm glad you're healthy.
Now I'm non-contagious and not immune, though the doctors cannot tell me for what length of time for each. They say at least a year, Rick. So I wear a mask every day, but I still feel like Superman.
Good for you. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear you're in good health. All right, I'm going to turn things over next to, we're going to move on to our first soapbox. It's going to be hosted by the GCE Lab School. The GCE Lab School has been involved in the Bughouse Square debates for the last 3 years. And they've been giving passionate youth a voice in the park. We're really grateful for their participation. Leading up to today's event, GCE has held 3 soapboxes covering law and order, the environment, and LGBTQ rights. Those were happening on Mondays throughout the past month. I do encourage you to take a look back at these soapboxes. The videos are available on the GCE Lab School Facebook page. Today, their youth soapbox is on the topic of voting, and it will be emceed by some really compelling folks that I've enjoyed getting to work with. GIMENA SERVIN, SHAY GUERRA, and Hugh Toe. Before I tell you about these 3, I want to bring up the subject of heckling. So usually in the park, we're able to, and it's part of the Bughouse tradition, to cheer on Bughouse speeches and heckle politely. We would normally be encouraging that with some spontaneous feedback for the speakers. Now, it's going to be hard to translate that into this virtual platform, so we encourage you to leave comments in the chat here in Zoom or in the chat on Facebook. Feel free to let your opinions be heard. We're going to be able to, we're going to have someone keeping an eye on there and making sure we engage with the chat box. All right, so I am now going to stop sharing my screen, and I've got Mina right here while I tell you about who we will now see. So GIMENA SERVIN is a 17-year-old rising senior from the GCE Lab School. They are interested in youth activism, political awareness, representation, and many art forms. They have been a participant and MC of the Bughouse Square Youth Soapbox for 3 years and are always excited to see what young activists have to offer each year. Welcome, GIMENA. SHAY GUERRA is also going to be here. She's a 20-year-old GCE alum, writer, artist, and Loyola University of Chicago undergrad. She has a deep passion for equity, justice, sustainability, and educating people on the conversion to a circular environmental system. I applaud that, Shay. And finally, we've got Hugh Toe. She's an arts teacher and the communications manager at GCE. She's also the coach of the school's Louder Than a Bomb Poetry Slam team. This is her 3rd year working alongside passionate youth organizers to host the Youth Soapbox. She's invigorated and inspired by the power of youth voices. So I'll hand it over to you, GIMENA, Shay, and Hugh. Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, my name is Mena, as previously stated. My co-MC, Shay, will hopefully be joining us soon. But for now, I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 Youth Soapbox. Leading up to today's Soapbox, we, GC Lab School, along with the Newberry, have been hosting virtual forums where young people are invited to share a soapbox speech, poem, or whatever moves them in a space moderated by an expert in the field of discussion. Throughout the month of July, these forums have covered gender rights, law and order, and environmental sustainability. This soapbox stands as our culminating event. Our theme this year is utilizing the citizen's voice as a means to initiate change through democracy. We are talking about voting the impacts, the gerrymandering, and how to apply political pressure. It is imperative that the youth are organized and educated in a way that allows them to thoroughly compound their power of the citizen through their votes. When the youth are given accurate and applicable information on how to direct their political representatives, a power shift in the policies made will be sanctified. As organizers, educators, and justice-oriented individuals, it is important to keep each other focused and motivated. The power of number is a major factor in ensuring the acknowledgement and handling of Black, Latinx, and minority groups' legislative issues. And now for the rules. All of our participants are 25 and under. Hate has no home here. So no racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist, or otherwise discriminatory language is allowed. Please be respectful and be conscious of your words. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging, of all the land we work and live on and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. This land acknowledgement is provided by Professor Mark Rose from Deakin University. Now, I am excited to share my soapbox speech, which is called Why We Need Pride. We need pride because pride isn't a feeling of pleasure or satisfaction that comes from one's own achievements. It's confidence, self-respect, and self-love. From us who have been socially marginalized We need pride because gay, dyke, and queer are still used as swear words. We need pride because conversion camps are still in use in 12 jurisdictions. We need pride because in 12 jurisdictions, the death penalty is a possibility for being in love. We need pride because trans youth attempt suicide 28 more times than cis youth. We need pride because schools and health professionals are not giving or teaching kids LGBTQ+ resources. We need pride because 40% of homeless youth is LGBTQ+. We need pride because we are still being discriminated for being ourselves. We need pride because we're still afraid of being killed. Pride is wearing head-to-toe rainbows. Pride is waving your flag, whatever the size. Pride is being able to show affection. Pride is accepting. Pride is you breathing. Pride is you loving. Pride is you living. Pride is you. We need pride because there are kids who think they're all alone. We need pride because closeted people need courage. We need pride because we need each other's support. We need pride because we deserve to feel loved, safe, and accepted. We need pride because we are glorious. We need pride because we must shine. We need pride because we love each other. Thank you. Now, next up we have Yemima, a rising senior at Loyola Academy. She's a poet and activist. This is her second year joining us on the Youth Soapbox. Her piece is called Voices of Today.
So the title of my poem is Voices of Today, and it's like a letter to America, as if America was a person. And it's about how there's so much injustice going on, but America chooses to ignore it. And at the same time, while America is ignoring our voices, especially voices of the youth, America still says that we are the leaders of tomorrow, even though America doesn't listen to us today. You know, so yeah, the poem, I already said this, but the poem is titled Voices of Today. Dear America, why do you hate us? Why do you ignore us? For years, you choose to ignore the oppressed while they are being oppressed by the oppressors. And you've always been putting us down while raising them up. And throughout the years, there have been some changes made, but at the end of the day, the scale of equality is still uneven. You already knew that, but you choose to ignore it. You probably don't recognize me, but I am one of the many voices that you have tried to silence. I am one of the many voices that you have been ignoring. But even though you ignore us, we can still hear your silence. However, I'm here to inform you that just because you're ignoring us doesn't mean that we're going to give up. We won't stop until the scale of equality is even, so that no more mothers are grieving for their Black children being beaten and killed by people who don't believe in equality. America, this is more than just a Black versus white issue. This is a right versus wrong issue. So we won't stop. We demand justice because our voices matter. This movement matters. Our freedom matters. Our lives matter. But you just want to ignore the struggle by saying that all lives matter, don't you? But America, since you're stating that all lives matter, don't Black lives fall under that category as well? How can you say that all lives matter, but ignore us when we say that Black lives matter? If all lives matter, George Floyd would still be breathing. If all lives matter, Breonna Taylor would have woken up the next day. If all lives matter, Ahmaud Arbery would have made it back home from his run. If all lives matter, slavery would have never even existed. If all lives matter, Tamir Rice would be the same age as me right now. If all lives matter, then act like it. Because all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. But you didn't listen to anything that I've said, have you? Instead, you've just been ignoring me this whole time, haven't you? We breathe the same air as everyone, but you want to hold our breath. We bleed the same blood as everyone, but you want to see us bleed. You'd rather cover your hands in our blood than have us be free. America, admit it. You want to be in our skin, but don't want to be in our shoes. You want to be in our skin, but hate us because we're born in it. You want to say the N-word, but don't want to say that Black lives matter. Do you know how hard it is speaking up to a country that will try to silence your voice, but at the same time, it will still call you leaders of tomorrow? It's not easy for us to speak about how intoxicating this country is when this country tries to intoxicate us. They try to tell us to get over it, but how are we supposed to get over it when the ignorant keep ignoring their ignorance? America, no matter how silent you are, we will keep on demanding justice. We are gonna lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven reign. And as this poem comes to an end, I have one last thing to say. America, how is it that you want us to be leaders of tomorrow, but you didn't listen to us today?
Hi, my name is Kate Alstrom. I am a rising junior.
Powerful words. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you, Gemma. Though these are pre-recorded, we want to thank everyone for speaking. Now, next up we have Kate. She is a rising junior at JC Lab School, a talented photographer spending her weekends pre-COVID photographing musicians in dimly lit venues. And during the protests that she took the streets of Chicago on May 30th, she switched the focus of her photos. Her piece is called Black Lives Matter.
I am a rising junior at GC Lab School, and I am also a photographer on the side. On May 30th, I attended one of the Black Lives Matter protests in downtown Chicago. I believe as someone who is non-Black, I should be supporting the amplification of Black voices and giving them a platform to be seen and heard. When these protests were being covered by the media, I tried to, in my own way, document them to exemplify communities coming together in the face of injustice to try and bring on change. When the news of George Floyd's murder came to light and the fact that there was a Hmong officer involved, as a second-generation Asian American, it felt even more important for me to get involved because this officer's involvement further perpetuates an anti-Black stereotype that plagues the Asian and Asian American Pacific Islander community. I am here to share some of my photos that I feel document the protests, and I feel very fortunate to have captured. For the safety and security, obviously, of the protesters, I purposely censored out and photoshopped out tattoos and other distinguishing marks. Thank you. Since the beginning of the protests, many mainstream news outlets would vilify these protesters by making them seem like they have a correlation with the lootings that would take place, while completely ignoring that a man's life was taken in such a heinous way. And these problems with police brutality and the murders of unarmed and innocent Black people have been going on for centuries. The whole protest was a mixture of people on foot and in their cars. I tried to highlight that with these two signs. The sign says justice, not just us. I feel a strong statement because I feel many groups of people tend to turn away from injustice when that's happening in other communities because, oh, it doesn't affect me, so much I care. Like, we are currently in a pandemic, and essential workers are being put into vulnerable situations, not just for them and their families, but also their communities. This pandemic has been disproportionately affecting Black and Brown and low-income neighborhoods due to lack of access to healthcare and these essential jobs. The next few I feel are pretty self-explanatory. You can see right here that there's a sign being held up that says silence is not an option, and it's not. We can't be silent about it. We can't be silent, like, use your voices. We also see a sign that says punish police brutality, and then next to the sign is a sign with 3 words that we keep hearing time after time. And here we have a group of young adults marching past the Bughouse with a sign listing victims of murder at the hands of the police. Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. This is an excerpt of the song "This Is America" by Childish Gambino, which was released a couple years back to highlight the violence against Black people in the United States, which is written on a USPS sticker and stuck to the side of a CTA bus. Here you can actually see a group of individuals who climbed on top of that bus. I found it very impactful because even though they stopped this bus, they were still being peaceful. They didn't destroy the bus or anything. They just were on it. In this photo, you can see a young Black man standing on top of a police car holding a baton in his hand. And then in this final image, you can see 2 Muslim women holding up a sign saying to protect Black lives while on top of their car. My intention for my photos were to document the scene and protect the integrity of the message. In order for there to be change, I believe we as a community need to keep pushing to demilitarize the police and invest in other aspects of our community, like mental health and education. If it is considered chemical warfare for tear gas to be used during war, then why is it justified for police to use on their own soil against the people that they are supposed to serve and protect?
Thank you so much, Kay. Now we are going to have a bit of a historical interlude. Bughouse Square, where every variety of radical sect, lunatic religion, and crackpot health panacea was preached in front of a row of soapboxes, wrote poet Kenneth Rexroth. Kenneth Rexroth was a Bughouse regular. As a teenager in the 1920s, he paved the way for young speakers like us to speak amongst our adult counterparts. He was an influential poet and painter born in South Bend, Indiana. At 14, his parents passed away, so he went to live with his aunt in Chicago. While here in Chicago, he often went to the homes and meeting places of political radicals, quickly identifying with the concepts of an agitated proletarian class and reciting poetry from a soapbox to crowds on the street corners downtown. By the late 1940s, Rexroth was laying the groundwork for what would become the San Francisco Renaissance. He was known in his lifetime as the godfather of the Beats. He organized and emceed 6 gallery readings in 1955, where Allen Ginsberg first read Howl. Rexroth's political activity was also notable. He was a conscientious objector during World War II and helped Japanese Americans evade the internment policies enacted by the US government. Rexroth died in 1982, but his words, passion for learning, and activism live on to this day. By remembering Rexroth, we may take inspiration from this loud and proud voice of activism and knowledge to fuel our own voice for change and leadership. Now, up next, we have Maeve, a rising sophomore at Lawrence University and a graduate from GC Lab School. They are a powerful human rights activist, and they are studying law to become a lawyer for LGBTQ+ specific cases. This is their third year joining us, and their piece is called Homesick.
Homesick for a home I've never had, heartbeat slow and calm, ribs protective around organs which are still alive somehow. Lungs move to the beat of the rain, expanding and contracting living creatures. Muscles are strong and practiced as they should be, embracing bones and tendons in harmony. A brain which sees my body and is thankful for all it does, one which sees the faults but accepts them as necessary. Lips which sing and share and show the world who I am, unforgiving in confidence, and a body which fits me. Home, a word I know the meaning of, but I only have faint memories of. Shelves lined with colorful yarn, a cracked leather chair twice my size, soft blue carpet perfect for resting your head. Thick ancient trees conceal the hint of other humans. The trail is long gone and covered by persistent leaves. And a log damp with moss holds mysteries smaller than a pin. Sharp, severe rocks stretching out for miles, obscured by mist and mystery. The rushing of waves, powerful and unforgiving below, ready to change the course of the land. A broken railroad track curving lazily over the slow river, where missing slats make a perfect window to see the plants, the crumbling platforms, the sky vibrant with the sign of another day over, a symbol of victory. Slowly, gradually, I look at my body, my unchosen home, and I see the beginning glimpses of a home. I yearn, ache for the time when I feel home and my legs too short, and my arms too long, and my chest too large, and my neck too squishy, and my thighs too big, and my head too hairy, and my legs not hairy enough, and my lungs strong and resilient, and my heart, it's lub-dub, a signal of survival. My thighs covered in scars, yet unresentful, my brain allowing me to write this poem, to remember my homes, to work towards my permanent safe home. Don't judge a book by its cover, a house by its facade, a home by its damaged skin. I am homesick for a home I've never had, but it is coming. I can feel it.
I wanted to make this more.
Thank you so much, Maeve. Next up, we have Ella, a rising 8th grader and a budding young activist. This is her second year participating in Bughouse Square, and she's focusing on Black Lives Matter and her life as a woman of color. Her piece is called Listen Now.
No, but there's so much shit. Oh, I can't say that. That's not how you should speak. At least that's what my community thinks. This brings it back to what I was saying. So many problems, yet people think this is a game we're playing. Children in cages, nothing is changing. The world's messed up. A missing soldier ends up dead. Police brutality, mama, I can't breathe. Don't kill me, please. I can't breathe. Millions of people chanting the haunting last words of an innocent Black man. Racism, sexism, homophobia, these are some problems and there are more. Ignorance, concentration camps, and innocent immigrants. Should I keep going? Innocent lives taken from us. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Vanessa Guillen. Thousands more names, and even then I keep going. These are some problems that many are ignoring. Maybe these are just things that I find infuriating. That's it for now because I can keep going and going and going.
Thank you so much, Ella. Next up, we have Shay, a rising junior at Loyola University. She's a striking and powerful activist, obtaining her master's in nonprofit management and public policy, and will be opening her own nonprofit rooted in Black wealth and health development through the vehicles of food, land, and excellence. This is her second year with us, and her piece is called An Ode from the Black Taxpayer.
Hello. As GIMENA already stated, this is an ode from the scared Black taxpayer. After speaking to each of you, Aldermen, the 12th, 14th, 49th, and 31st wards, it has come to my attention that the dollar amount of the scared Black taxpayer is seemingly not enough to grasp your attention. Neither were the deaths of Breonna Taylor, or Laquan McDonald, or Trayvon Martin, or George Floyd, or Elijah McCain. It has come to my attention as a scared Black taxpayer that fear is no longer enough. Protesting is no longer enough. To maintain legislative change, my dollar must go where my mouth is, which means it's not going to you anymore. My words have not reached you yet. I wonder if they will. I'm aware that there are many others like me, either scared or worrying for their children or worrying for their future or worrying for their finances, who are tired of worrying, who have supposed representatives who do not actually hear their voices, but instead take their dollars. It has come to our attention as a collective that organization is imperative. It has come to our attention as a collective that it does not matter what sort of money we give you. It matters how we organize ourselves and what money we do not give you, the money that we take from you. Our lives are not some dollar sign. Our fears are not to be quantified in a dollar number and penny amount to be brushed aside and then stuffed into your pockets. It has come to our attention as a collective that we, as taxpayers, scared and not, Black, brown, Latin, and everything in between, must now organize. Brutalizing the city is not enough. Protesting in the streets is not enough. Emailing you directly is not enough. As I received several automatic email replies talking about how they're dealing with all of our concerns the best that they can. It is unfair to say that we are in a representative democracy, as the Black and brown taxpayers have not been regarded, despite their major financial influence. It is unfair to say that the aldermen are working as hard as they can when several people have commented on the same issues within the ward regarding policing, regarding community organizations, regarding the way in which we handle our problems for minority peoples. And yet we are here. We have come to this crossroad many times. We have seen it happen in Ferguson. We have seen it happen in Chicago. We have seen it happen in Minnesota. We have seen it happen in Philadelphia. We have come to this crossroads many times, none of which were mediated by the Black taxpayer's dollar. What does that tell us? Both scared and brave Black taxpayers, that our dollar doesn't matter, that our lives don't matter because our dollar doesn't matter, that the quality of our lives is not up for discussion. To continue to write checks and rally votes and give sympathetic votes to the lesser of two evils does nothing for the scared Black taxpayer, for the scared Mexican taxpayer, for any citizen who does not feel entirely represented or heard by their organizations and their government. The policies we have in place may mediate the problem and may throw the impoverished Black citizen a bone by pretending to acknowledge what is going on. However, nothing has been solved. I must repeat again, by not solving the problem with the taxpayer's dollar, it is telling us, just as you've told us with the kneeling on our necks and the invasion of our homes with no knock warrants, that our lives do not matter and our dollars will not matter. And despite our organization, we will not be taken seriously. The only difference I find between what happened in Ferguson and what has been happening with our brother George Floyd is that one of them was written off as rioting. One of them was entirely dismissed as Black rage and an attempt to grapple at material wealth through the rioting. One of them was taken seriously. One of them was well coordinated. One of them implemented strikes against the cities to ensure that these people would be heard, and it would not be brushed under the rug as Black violence or young hooligan debauchery. I find this highly interesting. Not only highly interesting, but highly concerning, and how easy it is for these people to simply take the Black taxpayer's dollar and put it in their pockets, but not let the Black taxpayer words come from their mouths or be written on their ordinances. I think it is time for each of us, taxpayers and not, to organize ourselves thoroughly, to implement a strong political pull and make strong political demands. It wasn't enough to have a Black president. It's not going to be enough to have a minority congresswoman. It will still not be enough to have Joe Biden, who was the right-hand man of our favorite Barack Obama. It will not be enough unless we have legitimate legislative pull, unless we put our dollars where our policies need to be, and we make real demands. It is not fair to any taxpayer to continue to fund representation that is not handling our issues, that is not caring for our people, and is not willing to make adjustments as the taxpayer demands. This is how we exercise democracy. Through this, I am a less scared Black taxpayer. I am a more bold, Black, bodacious woman who is prepared to organize and prepared to withdraw her dollar from the representative's mouth. Are you? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shay. So thank you to all of our speakers for participating in this year's virtual Bughouse Square Youth Soapbox. We are so thankful to everyone watching and to the Newberry for helping us host and making this possible. Thank you again to everyone watching and for commenting and talking as well amongst yourselves, and for sticking with us through this odd and difficult time. I hope we gave you solace and something to think about. And we hope you enjoyed our virtual Bughouse Square Youth Soapbox. Please don't let these issues go away after we finish talking. Keep these in your mind and keep talking about them. Now, we introduce GCE's head of school, Cabell King.
Hello, thank you, Jimena. Thank you, all of you. GCE Lab School is of course sincerely grateful for our relationship with the Newberry Library and the Bughouse Square to date. The soapbox, which we discovered in this event, has become a prominent symbol for the school, representing the significance of young voices, civic engagement, and ideas that matter. Soapbox is the name now of our weekly school assembly, where we discourse as a whole community about issues most pressing to students, faculty, and school partners. On behalf of the school, again, I would like to thank Newberry Library for coordinating this event and involving us in its rich history. Of course, I must thank our young presenters today. You are all brave and inspiring. And I'm sorry, of course, that we are not gathered in person, principally because of the energy of the park and the opportunity for this cohort of young speakers to come and support one another. I hope still that we can use this event to connect young activists. Last, let me thank again Hugh, our communications manager at GCE, who manages the Youth Soapbox from behind the scenes. Also Jimena and Shay, our hosts today, who participated in planning, student recruiting, artwork, and social media, and simply setting a tone and expectation of authenticity and significance. When schools closed in March, Illinois Public Schools announced that grades could not fall below what they were at that time. AP exams were shortened and were redesigned to cover the first half of the year. International Baccalaureate decided not to administer their spring exams, and numerous colleges determined quickly that they would become test optional for the upcoming admission season. And high school students across the state and country openly wondered why they should continue doing work. The curriculum at GCE Lab School is founded in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in circumstances that situate the work and life each of our students will pursue in their futures. We've been teaching about pandemics in our sophomore global health curriculum for 10 years. We've been teaching also about climate change, fresh water scarcity, social entrepreneurship and innovative design, social inequality, the global economy, food security, immigration, and global government, to name just a few pressing issues. We told our students that this crisis, this pandemic, is the reason we study. That is, it is disruptive, but it is not a reason to stop. We study so that we can be agents who respond capably to challenge and not as victims of circumstance. Now, together, all of us watching are in the midst of a debate about whether schools should reopen in the fall, how they should reopen in the fall. Whether or not we are back in the building, I encourage us not to pine too strongly for business as usual. We know that education needs to change, and some of the vulnerabilities of business as usual have been exposed in recent months. We need to encourage student engagement and student voice, as we do at this event, to address countless inequities, to encourage independent inquiry, to expose students to workplaces and questions that they wouldn't otherwise encounter. We're working on these issues at GCE, a diverse, urban, project-based program where we believe every voice matters. So again, we are really proud of today's student speakers who challenge us with bold ideas and tough questions. We will continue as a school to elevate young voices and support innovations to improve our world. Thank you again.
Hi, Cabo. Thanks so much.
Hello, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you're staying well.
You too.
All right. Thank you so much to GIMENA. Thank you to SHAY. Thank you to Hugh behind the scenes. You guys did a really wonderful job. It was really an honor to work with you again this year. What is up next? Let's see. We are going to I'm going to intro you to Paul DURICA and the Society of Smallness, who will have a segment about Bughouse today. So they're going to take it full circle into the present day and probably make us wishful that we were there in the square. So Paul, I will let you take it away. And if I can find you. There you are.
Okay. Hello again. I'm going to be sitting down in a minute with members of the Society of Smallness who've been part of the Bughouse Square experience since 2014. But to introduce them, I thought I would show a short video if I can share the screen. Let's see if I can. One moment.
Hey, Jorge.
Live events. They there? Okay. Great. Let's start. So what you're going to see now is a video that was shot in 2017, the third year that the Society of Smallness has been helping the Newberry Library in moderating what is our open soapbox. And I think I'll give you a good overview of how the open soapbox has functioned in the past, but also the role that this performance collective has played in terms of managing it. So I will start the video now. Let me make it good.
I'd say that soapboxes are a very important part of modern society. My name is Doug Lawson. I am an artist in town. There are a lot of statements that really would not have the audience that they would, other than when people look up at them. I say, I will rather die an aphid in the clutches of a ladybug than I will ever be a pooping sex slave for the Moloch ants of madness.
I am the founder of the Society of Smallness. What is the Society of Smallness, you are asking yourselves? The Society Society of Smallness pushes us to ask questions. How big do things need to be?
I belong to the Society of Smallness because I feel like it's nice to be part of something bigger, even if that thing that is bigger than you is still very small.
The Society of Smallness for me is a space where we can just be small. We don't have to be seen. We can just be ourselves. Let's call this space, a soapbox, a space of actualization. We step up onto the soapbox to perform. There he is, he's actualizing.
I did want to point out that we are no longer on the planet.
Great. Okay. Why am I unable to start the video?
Hey, Paul, I stopped your video while the video was playing, so you just need to start it again.
Okay, it's saying that I'm unable to start it.
All right, well, I guess why don't you keep talking and I'll work on it for you.
Okay, yeah, it says, yeah, I can't start it because the host has stopped it. Ah, all right, well, this is true Bughouse. So I think we'll be coming to like the golden age of radio for a moment. So if I can ask the members of the Society of Smallness who have joined me this afternoon, Georgina Valverde, Matt Stone, Jeff Mikulski, Marcos Herrera, and Kate Thomas to turn on their video and audio. We'll get started. Let's see. Oh, I'm back. Great. So thank you all, Society of Smallness, for joining me this afternoon. It's sad that we can't all be actually in Washington Square Park and having you guys run the open soapbox this year, but we're grateful for all that you've done since 2014. So Georgina, I thought I would start with you. And can you tell the people tuning in today a little bit more about the work that the Society of Smallness does and kind of why you guys decided to become involved with Bughouse?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So Society of Smallness is a project that began in 2012. And as an extension of my practice as an artist, in my work, I care about things like stuff we throw away in the trash, or crafts, or the work of women that has been unrecognized, especially artists. So I think that it was already a natural extension of those concerns. The idea that there are, recently I heard Dave Chappelle during his acceptance speech for the Mark Twain Award say that he was just, an example of somebody that's randomly makes it to the top, that there are so many people that are brilliant and exceptional, and there doesn't seem to be a platform for everyone. So part of the idea of the Society of Smallness is that, these exceptional experiences and people can be found in everyday life, in ordinary moments. And I think that's something that we witness at Bughouse Square. Everyday citizens stepping up on a very small box and all of a sudden augmenting their voice and, sharing with us unique perspectives and who they truly are and what they care about. We became involved with Bughouse Square in 2014, and can I just out you, Paul? You were somebody that kind of propped us up on the soapbox. And to be quite honest, during our first year, when we were invited to facilitate the open soapbox, I don't think any of us knew what we were doing. My colleague Jeff Mikulski can probably speak more to that experience of the improvisational nature of being on the soapbox, and also encountering the crowd that is just wildly diverse and features voices from the very young, to older people, to a huge range of concerns. So we've been doing this since 2014, and we're in a lot of lessons, and I think my colleagues will be sharing some of those different nuances of participating in Bughouse Square during the segment.
Thank you, Georgina. Matt, I wanted to bring you into the conversation now, because one of the interesting things about having the Society of Smallness sort of work with the open soapbox is that you've created a whole kind of design and aesthetic around it. So the people who show up in Washington Square Park at the Bughouse Square debates, you know, they have a lot of materials that they can make use of as they're kind of crafting their speeches in the moment. And many of those are designed by you. So did you want to talk for a moment about how you kind of like developed that kind of Bughouse aesthetic? I think you have some images maybe you wanted to share with us of some posters. Let's see. Is Matt here?
I think Matt just texted me that there's no video capability. Maybe we can move on with Jeff. And
okay. This is very Bughouse in this moment, as we're just going to roll with the punches. So Jeff, the next question was going to be to you, because we were going to move from, you know, how the sort of open soapbox experience gets designed to kind of how we sort of like prep pretty much anybody who just kind of comes into the park that day to talk. And you do a really good job of kind of preparing that, kind of drawing on your long history in Chicago improv and as a performer yourself. So do you want to talk about a little bit about how you help to kind of like set the tone and create this sort of spirit?
First of all, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say I've witnessed Georgina and Matt put this together, and there's so much work involved in putting the materials. They create the materials pretty much from scratch. Matt's a graphic designer. He does beautiful work on both printing, and they really go through a lot of preparation in deciding what the tone of the event will be, and certain kind of archaic heckles to be passed around to people out in the field. We encourage heckling. Part of the thing about the improvisational background is because you can't control what's going to happen in an open soapbox, and you can't control, you know, it's a live event. So you can prepare a lot for it. You can prepare in you know, just as well as you can, but whatever happens is what's happening. So my job might be sometimes to, I don't stop anyone from saying what they're saying, but I may engage them if they're things particularly offensive or hateful, in a way that at the same time they feel like they're getting to say what they want to say, but points out to the audience that we're kind of aware how what's coming out is. And that's my job, is to work like a stand-up MC, really, as far as like being some sort of bridge between the people there to hear the speakers and the speakers we have that you know, anyone can sign up. So that's the thing. So try to make everyone look good. That's what I try to do.
And we're going to hear from some of those speakers in a moment. But Matt, I see that you've been able to join us on video, which is great. Do you want to try sharing some of the images that you prepared? Oh, and you're muted too.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, awesome. Sorry about that. To pick up on what Jeff was saying, I'm going to share today. Oh, here we go. I'm going to share my screen, share some images of the sort of atmosphere that we try to present at Bughouse Square. So yeah, as Jeff was saying, what we're doing from our masterful MC, as shown here, who can dodge and parry from all the whatever's coming at him, and kind of also protect the person who's speaking in some ways. We try to encourage a lively atmosphere on the public soapbox and inviting to participate. So I'm going to, so that's from the MC, Jeff, who we've all met. We create signs, a variety of messages, and we distribute them. So from the kind of antagonistic to the sycophantic to the Newberry, I guess, but that's a lovely one. The signs are one intervention that we bring. And if anybody was paying attention to one of our panelists, Marcos especially, has brought the mastery of masks. This was I think it was Don't Kindleize Me or something. This was about the value of actually reading books.
Facebook, Matt, was my rage
Oh,
against
Facebook, of course. That's so clear. Marcos also loves a pun too. So this is like a twofer in this one. This is the Me Too mask. Signage wise, we also have clock keepers who are very important to keep things under 5 minutes. This is Kat Sino, who's really established the ground rules of being a timekeeper. And this is Scott, who had a little more of a festive atmosphere that he brought. And then the occasional superhero. See if you can spot the superhero in this photo. That's Captain Chicago, who's come quite a few times. Right, he's not afraid to sport the tights for sure. And then the kind of occasional prop that we can hand out to the audience. And that's kind of the visual presentation. But yeah, as Jeff said, Marcos, Georgina, and I, and other people have been involved, get together and try to have tangible items that can bring festive, inviting, and playful nature to the crowd, because it can be deadly serious at some points. I guess not deadly, but it can be very serious.
Well, I think you've done a really good job, since 2014 in kind of organizing the chaos, which in some ways actually does connect to the longer history of Bughouse. One thing I didn't talk about in one of the earlier presentations was how there was always some structure to it. Soapbox speakers respected one another. There usually was somebody who was like keeping track of time. And then you guys kind of helped sort of create that structure in which people can really sort of just focus on finding their voice and making sure that they have the opportunity to do so. And I think now, if I can share my screen, I'm going to show a couple videos of some speakers, just to give you a sense of the range of people who participate in the Soapbox, open Soapbox experience. So let me see if this works. All right. This one will be near and dear to lovers of libraries and the Newberry.
My soapbox, you can bury me because I'll be dead.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
This is the Newberry. Isn't this a wonderful library?
Yeah.
Isn't this a library that should serve as a model?
Yes.
This library has not subscribed to the library's transformation movement, which claims, well, libraries need to keep up with the digital age. So what are they doing to make libraries keep up with the digital age? Yeah, they're getting rid of the books. They're adding children's rooms that don't have just children's books. Well, now adding a checkerboard to the public library, what's that got to do with the digital age? What does having a rock concert in a library when other people are trying to study, what has that got to do with keeping up with the digital age? I say, get rid of the American Library Association if this is what they're preaching in the ALA. And they have forgotten their mission. We live in a time.
So, what you see there, I think, is a very kind of niche perspective, but you guys did a nice job of kind of setting it up and even participating in the heckling a little bit and encouraging some kind teasing. But what you see there too is just the sort of, that we get all sorts of people participating in this open soapbox, and of all ages as well. And so Kate, I know that you, apart from your work with Society of Smallness, have a background as in arts education. And like, and then earlier, we got to see the wonderful segment by the GCE students at the lab school. And then what is your sense of the sort of value that an experience like this has for young people? And why should they be encouraged to kind of get up on a soapbox and share out what they're passionate about with a larger community?
Well, I think it's a form of civic engagement. This year I recorded my son and his friend. So I'm all about passing this on to educators and students. One year I taught a whole course where I used SOAPBOX. I mandated my art education students, who were largely visual arts teachers, to stand out in the public at the university and do a SOAPBOX lecture. And they were absolutely terrified and didn't know that that was on the curriculum. But, I think what soapboxing does is it teaches us spontaneity. You can come prepared, but you can never really know what's going to happen. But also teachers, we stand in front of students all the time. So if we don't learn to stand on the soapbox, what have we got? So, but I also want to say about the Society of Smallness, like I've learned through this collective to value the smallness of who we are. And that's something that I also want to pass on to teachers that I work with. We don't have to be big. We can be small. We can demand less. We can become imperceptible.
Thank you. And why don't we now hear from one of those youth speakers? So this was, Georgina, remind me of the year that this young person gave the speech. Was that 2017?
I think this is 2015.
2015, okay. But it's very kind of resonant with the themes that we've been discussing today. And that has to do with lowering the voting age. So let's listen to this. It's about a minute.
Frightening.
Wait to have a say in the running of their own country.
Because you might die at 17.
Another reason for lowering the voting age is that children can make well-informed votes before the age of 18. Like what? The Nickelodeon Kids Voting Program, Kids to Pick the President, has correctly predicted the outcome of each and every presidential election since the program.
Kids have too much time in their hands.
Kids know it.
With the exception of Kerry Bush election.
Whoa.
This makes it clear that kids have the ability to make very well-educated votes. In addition,
Kids rock.
It is not required for adults to make well-informed votes. In fact, research has shown that they can be, in fact, affected by media bias. Therefore, why should children be required to make well-educated votes? The third and most important reason.
All right. So that was great. I think he makes a compelling case. It's interesting that the students got the Bush-Kerry election wrong. Of course, when I was his age, I thought Michael Dukakis was going to win in a landslide. So we all make mistakes. But one thing about having an event like this in a public space is that you want it to be kind of as open and accessible as possible. And Marcos, I know that's something that you've been thinking about a lot since you've become involved in the Bughouse Square experience. Do you mind talking a little bit about the sort of work that you do outside of Bughouse and the sort of value that you see this experience playing for the people with whom you work on a regular basis? Oh, I might need you to unmute, Marcos.
Okay.
Oh, yep, hear you now.
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So first I want to stake my claim to mask wearing because I wore them before they were so cool. Anyway, so on that note, I'm an advocate. I'm a man of many masks. I'm an advocate for adults with developmental disabilities. And so the work that I do as an advocate is we help facilitate integration, choice, and independence. And I think it's kind of a micro unit of desire, of liberation. And I think that that's something that crosses over into the work that we do in Society of Smallness, and that is using creative paradigms to collaborate with participants to find greater freedoms in expression and being creative and in your whatever sort of expression you have.
Great, and I think we're going to show one final video that involves one of your clients. Do you want to set it up a little bit, Marcos?
Oh yes. So this is somebody that is she's a performer. She has a developmental disability, but this is an example of the kind of work I do, and that is that generally people with developmental disabilities get clustered with groups of people. I'm sorry, but that's how it happens. It gets institutionalized, and so we try very hard to get people integrated into the world that's theirs, no matter what their ability is. And so we worked really hard to work on a song. It was Tina Turner's song. And so we spent a good week and so just rehearsing the lyrics for that song. That's a song she chose to do. So that's the setup.
Okay, great. And let me see if this works. Technology, my friend.
Is that right? Yeah, that's right. All right. So, what would you like? What would you like people to vote for? Vote for me. All right. Excellent. Excellent. Vote for me. Okay. Vote for me. Did you hear that? That's what I did. Vote for me. I'll vote for me. Okay. So, big wheel keep on turning. Proud Mary keep on burning. 'Cause we're rolling on the river. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ladybug. One more thing.
Paul, I didn't mention in the setup that was the year that we decided with the Society of Smallness that it might be best to propose some insect candidates for the president. That was 2016. She was, of course, a ladybug, and I was Roach.
I'm waiting to see your Tina Turner dance.
I was there. It might have been before or after.
Do you remember who won among the insect candidates?
I think it was termite, as we all know. Oh, sorry about that.
Termite, very industrious, very industrious and disciplined. Well, thank you, Society of Smallness, once again for over these many years, kind of like helping to provide some structure around the chaos that is Bughouse Square, for making the experience open and accessible to people of all ages and backgrounds, and really kind of creating a very kind of healthy and fun and vibrant energy. We're going to transition now into our virtual soapboxes, and we'll get to hear some more speakers, including Georgina. I believe you have a video, right, that you pre-recorded. And Kate, you mentioned the one of your son, so we're all looking forward to seeing those. So thank you for joining us for this historical interlude concerning the history of Bughouse Square, and I'm going to hand things back off to our hosts, Elizabeth and Sarah.
Hi, hello again. Thank you, Paul, and thank you to the Society of Smallness. Next up is our second musical performance in Washington Square Park by Philip Armstrong and Greg Woods, founders of Mosaic Soul Ensemble. The song "Don't Take My Papa Away From Me" was written by Joe Hill, a Swedish-American labor activist, songwriter, and member of IWW. This piece dates from the First World War and embodies the anti-war pleadings of a young child. Please enjoy this performance.
A little girl with her father's sleigh in an old cabin across the sea. Her mother dear in the cold gray lane, with her father she'd always be. But then one day the Great War broke out, and her father was told to go. The little girl pleaded
was gone. Nobody ever like him can be. No one can sew with me play. Don't take my father away from me. Please don't take Papa away. Her tender greetings were all in vain, and her father went to the war. He'll never kiss her goodnight again, for he fell mid the cannon's roar. Greater a soldier was never born, but his brave heart was pierced one day. And as he lay dying, he heard someone crying, a girl's voice from far away. Don't take my Papa away from me. Don't leave me here all alone. He has cared for me so tenderly, ever since Mother was gone. Nobody ever like him can be. No one can sew with me play. Don't take my father away from me. Please don't take Papa away.
All right, thank you, Kate and Mosaic Soul Ensemble, again, for that performance. If you're just tuning in, welcome to Bughouse 2020. I'm excited to introduce our main event. This will be the Open Soapbox, emceed by Jorge Mujica and Dud Lawson, who I will be introducing to you shortly. Dud and Jorge will take us through the speeches. These will go on for about an hour, hour and 20, and it'll be a combination of live and pre-recorded videos that speakers sent in, all on the subject of voting. As a reminder, we encourage heckling and commentary in the Q&A box or in the chat function on Facebook. So without further ado, Dud and Jorge, if you are here and you would like to make yourselves visible.
Oh, I'd love to, but I can't start my video because the host has stopped it.
Same thing here, same thing.
Elizabeth.
All right.
Remedy that.
Hey.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not quite ready to let you talk, but I will say Dud Lawson is a writer, printmaker, and Bughouse Square host living in Chicago, Illinois. After growing up in the South, like me, the intro to Perfect Strangers inspired him to make his own great migration to the city, where he spent the last decade, give or take 2 or 3 years. If so compelled, you can follow him at Dud Lawson on pretty much all platforms. Thank you, Dud, for joining us. And it is my pleasure to next introduce Jorge Mujica. Jorge is currently an organizer at Arise Chicago, working with immigrant and low-income workers. Arise Chicago is an organization dedicated to fighting workplace injustice through educating and organizing workers, as well as advocating for public policy reform. Jorge has also worked as a reporter for newspapers, including La Raza, and is the co-chair of the National Writers Union, as well as the regional vice president of the Mexican American Coalition, an organization dedicated to supporting the Mexican and Mexican American community in the United States. Jorge served as a Bughouse Soapbox speech judge last year, and in 2007, he was awarded the Altgeld Freedom of Speech Award. So we're really delighted to welcome him back to the Bughouse stage. There might be a little bit of lag as we move between our live segments and our pre-recorded videos, so please be patient with us as we put our sort of human error on full display. But I will turn things over fully now to Dud and Jorge. Thanks again.
Hey, how you doing, Jorge?
Pretty good. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing all right. I like your Diablos hat. That's pretty sweet.
Dang, you are a connoisseur. You know, nobody identifies this, but this is baseball, the best sport in the world, and the Mexican team, the best one. Yes,
Big
sir.
fan of hats, big fan of baseball. There's a nice Venn diagram between the two.
All right.
But yeah, we're going to be introducing you to all the Bughouse speakers. We're inside, as everybody's noticed, so this is the only time that you will hear my megaphone. So I promise I'm not going to do that again. So Jorge, who do we got up first? Who's our first speaker today?
We're going to have Lori Osborne first, talking about Illinois women and the suffragette movement. Suffragette, a French imported word. Well, Latin, but then French, and you know, French immigrants, they were here too, and they embedded this word into the struggle for the vote in the United States. We are celebrating now the 100th anniversary of women voting in the United States. Unfortunately, they have had to vote for male candidates all the time except one, for the White House at least. But yes, Lori Osborne, she would be first. Take it away, Lori.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Oh,
can.
great. Is the video working? Let's see. Hi, everybody. I'm actually speaking to you from the Frances Willard House Museum. I'm upstairs in Frances Willard's office. Thought this was an appropriate setting to do this. But I'll be talking about Illinois and the importance of Illinois to the national suffrage movement. Most everyone knows, as you just heard, that the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment is coming in August. August 26th is the actual date. I wanted you to know something most people don't know, which is how important Illinois was. And if you know anything about the suffrage movement, you might think it all happened in New York State, or at least on the East Coast. That is not the case. If you recently watched the PBS American Experience show called The Vote, you might be a little confirmed in those views. I'm here to tell you how important Illinois was. So we're going to play a little game of Illinois women's suffrage. Did you know? Did you know that it took almost 70 years? The fight for women's suffrage started in the 1840s and lasted through 1919. In Illinois, the movement began in the 1850s, but really took off after the Civil War. Though it was centered in Chicago, it was a statewide movement, and suburbs like Evanston, where I am right now, and Oak Park played a critical role, as well as other downstate locations. Did you know that Illinois women were key strategists in the national suffrage movement? They helped create the idea of a partial ballot for women that would just be for school boards and other family-related issues. They also called this the home protection ballot, and that was Frances Willard's contribution to the movement, one of her many. Voting would then be part of women's traditional roles as mothers, daughters, wives, and sisters, not outside them. So this partial ballot idea was first tried out in Illinois, and it actually worked really well as a strategy, partly because it persuaded many women that they should join the suffrage cause and countered the anti-womanly claim of the anti-suffragists. Illinois women started voting for school boards statewide in the 1890s. And once they were voting, they used their voting to gain more access to voting, which was a critical reason why the partial ballot strategy worked. Did you know that Illinois was first twice? In 1913, Illinois gave women the right to vote in all elections not prohibited by the Illinois Constitution. Illinois was the first state east of the Mississippi to do so. This meant that Illinois women were voting for president in 1916. And this 1913 vote was really important because it not only gave Illinois women national power, it caused concern in other states. They didn't want Illinois women alone to sway presidential elections, maybe pass that prohibition amendment. So many other states got on the women's voting bandwagon after 1913. The other way Illinois was first was when the 19th Amendment was finally passed and sent out to the states in 1919. Illinois was also the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment. Illinois beat out Wisconsin by 1 hour, and Michigan later ratified later that day. making the Lake Michigan states the 3 first states to ratify the 19th Amendment. And the 19th Amendment wasn't ratified for more than a year fully by all the states needed, 26 states at the time. Did you know that African American women played an active and critically important role in the suffrage movement in Illinois? Although discrimination in the suffrage movement existed throughout the US, in Illinois especially, this did not prevent African American women from actively working for their own rights and to protect the voting rights of active African American men under the 15th Amendment. Because the Black population was so large in Illinois and Chicago, there was lots of activism for the suffrage movement in the Black community. Women like Ida B. Wells, who called Illinois home, and many others also reached across the lines of race and class to forge coalitions with white women to work for suffrage for all. And when those coalitions broke down, as they often did, the Black women kept working and provided important strategy and energy for the movement in the state. Did you know, finally, the work was not done then and it's not done now. The 19th Amendment did not solve the problem of exclusion from citizenship rights for women. We just finally ratified the ERA earlier this year in Illinois. We were among the last states to do so. The battle over who is a citizen and what that citizenship entails goes on to this day. So thank you so much. I was really excited to participate today, and I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone else has to say.
Oh man, I don't know much about women. I don't know much about voting. I don't know a little bit about women voting. I just want to say, hey, good job, United States. Only waiting 143 years to let white women vote. Good on you guys. Real good. So next up, it looks like we are going to have one of the wild things about doing the Bughouse on the internet is that somebody can record something ahead of time, and then we can play a video, and that's what we're going to do now. This is going to be a pre-recorded speech from Michael Brennan, and it's called 2 Reasons to Vote: Fair Taxes and Affordable Health Care. And you know what? I could get behind both of those things, I think.
Thank you very much for your attention to 2 very important reasons to vote. I'm Michael Brennan. I'm a retired political researcher and community activist. And you're probably very well aware of how we are suffering in Illinois, especially because of the coronavirus. And there's something we can do that would help a lot to address this financially, and that is to make our taxes fair. And we can do this with the Fair Tax Amendment. One of the problems we have in Illinois is that we can only tax one level of rate, one rate for income tax. What I mean is that we can only have one tax rate for all Illinoisans, no matter how wealthy they are. And that rate is now only 4.95%. If we pass the Fair Tax Amendment, we can have different tax rates that will be higher for the higher incomes. And right now also, we have a passage by the Illinois General Assembly of new income tax rates that would take effect if we get a Fair Tax Amendment. And the new rates would be no rate higher than what we're paying now. No, the rate for what we are paying now for people that are making under $250,000 would be 4.95%, the same as we're paying. But for incomes of $250,000 or more, the rate goes up to either 7.45%. So to get this Fair Tax Amendment, we need to get a vote for the amendment of people voting in the election. So I really appreciate if you're willing to help us in the state of Illinois by passing this Fair Tax Amendment. That's one very important reason to vote. The second very important reason to vote is our healthcare system And we need to make healthcare our human right, treat it as our human right. Right now, every 10 minutes, a fellow American dies for lack of health care. And of those that do get health care, here's a picture from the Tribune of an article that shows the struggle that they face. This little girl in this picture has cancer, and her family is struggling to pay the bills. It's not unheard of, according to that Tribune article, for treatment of cancer to cost $500,000. Now, what's scary is that President Trump, despite his promises to do something about affordable health care, asked the Republican senators to support the Graham-Cassidy bill. The Graham-Cassidy bill would take millions of us off of our insurance plan, millions of us. And this would mean thousands and thousands more of us would die every year because they lost their insurance. We can't afford to have people die like this. Here's what the Graham-Cassidy bill looks like. So thank you for your attention to this very important issue. And there's these two important reasons to vote. Imagine how good you'd feel if you can help us with those two things. One is the fair tax amendment, and two is voting for someone else besides not Donald Trump. Thanks a lot.
The fair tax amendment. That's a pretty interesting name for that. It's like the right to work. It says one thing, but it might not be what it's saying. So Jorge, who do we got up next?
Wow, those were two very important words, taxes and health. And now we're going to hear from Ellen Corley to talk about another word, which is quite important. And it's not the V word, it's not the vote, but the F word, and how it relates to voting and elections.
Ellen Corley, if you have joined, can you please raise your hand so we can unmute you? If not, we'll have to move on to Amy Lakin.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, as we just said, Amy Lakin has a pre-recorded segment that we're going to watch and listen and learn from right now. And their piece is called Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Suffragist You Should Know. That's a lot of names, so hopefully there's a lot to say here.
This project is a product of a committee with representation from the Chicago branch of the AAUW, the Logan Square Chamber of Arts, the Vivian G. Harsh Society, and Working Women's History Project. The actor portraying Frances Ellen Watkins Harper is Alma Washington, a member of Actors Equity.
Good afternoon. I was born Frances Ellen Watkins on September the 24th, 1825 in Baltimore, Maryland, to three Black parents. After marrying, I became Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. An odd and uncle scheme after both my parents died when I was 3. My life has been devoted to the abolitionist and suffrage movements, as well as to campaigning for temperance. Over the years, I worked with Frederick Douglass, Francis Willard, Mary Ann Shadd Carey, Ida B. Wells, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony, among others. When I felt it necessary, I publicly disagreed with their positions. I co-founded the National Association of Colored Women's Club and also published books of poetry, a novel, and other writings. Now, what you will hear today is taken entirely from my writings. I feel I am something of a novice upon this platform, born of a race whose inheritance has been outrage and wrong. Most of my life has been spent battling against those wrongs, but I did not feel as keenly as others that I had these rights in common with other women, which are now demanded. About 2 years ago, I stood within the shadows of my home. A great sorrow had befallen on my life. My husband had died suddenly, leaving me a widow with 4 children, one my own and the others stepchildren. I tried to keep my children together, but my husband died in debt. And before he had been in his grave 3 months, the administrator had swept all away. I took my children in my arms and went out to seek my living. I say then that justice is not fulfilled so long as woman is unequal before the law. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul. You tried that in the case of the Negro. You pressed him down for 2 centuries, and in so doing, you crippled the moral strength and paralyzed the spiritual energies of the white men of the country. Society cannot afford to neglect the enlightenment of any class of its members. I do not believe that giving the woman the ballot is immediately going to cure all the ills of life. Now, you white women speak here of rights. I speak of wrongs. I, as a colored woman, has had in this country an education which has made me feel as if I were in the situation of Israel. One hand against every man and every man's hand against me. Going from Washington to Baltimore this spring, they put me in the smoking car. They did it once, but the next time they tried, they failed, for I would not go in. I felt the fight in me, but I don't want to have to fight all the time. One day I took my seat in the car, and the conductor came to me and told me to take another seat. I screamed, "Murder!" The man said if I was black, I ought to behave myself. I knew that if he was white, he was not behaving himself. Are there no wrongs to be righted? The tendency of the present age is toward broader freedom, an increase of knowledge, the emancipation of thought, and recognition of the brotherhood of man. And in this movement, woman as a companion of man must be a sharer. So close is the bond between man and woman that you cannot rise up with one without lifting the other. The world cannot move without woman's sharing in the movement. The ballot in the hands of woman means power added to influence. How well she will use that power, I cannot foretell. But I know that no nation can gain its full measure of enlightenment and happiness if one half of it is free and the other half is fettered.
Oh man, I love seeing people who are good at talking. You'd think it would make me feel worse about myself, but I like watching it. That was very impassioned. So next up, Jorge, why don't you tell what we're gonna listen to right now?
We're gonna talk about guilty, I guess, and not guilty. You know, having a legal system doesn't necessarily mean to have a justice system. And I think that's what we're gonna be hearing about from Kirsten Tynan. Kirsten, you there? Go ahead.
I am. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I want to thank the Newberry Library, all of these wonderful individuals who have put this event together, and all of our participants. You're giving me the opportunity to put a little different spin on today's topic for the soapbox speeches. The speakers before me, and probably most of the speakers after me, have been talking about electoral voting. Which candidate should you vote for? Which way should you vote on different ballot initiatives? How should we run elections in the first place? Those sorts of things. But I'm going to be talking about a different kind of voting. You may be called once, maybe twice a year to vote in an election, say during primary season, and then again during a general election. But your vote may be needed at any time of the year to deliver a just verdict when you sit in a jury box. And in fact, I'm going to argue today that that vote, your not guilty vote in particular, is the most powerful vote you can cast. Now, why would I say that? When you are voting in an election, your voice is one of many, but you cannot yourself, but without anyone else's cooperation, affect some certain end. Yours is one of a collective. But when you sit on a jury, when you vote not guilty, you can stop an injustice from happening instantly. Most people don't know this, but until this year, there were 2 states where a verdict of guilty could be delivered by a non-unanimous jury. And this was happening in Louisiana and Oregon. But earlier this year, the Supreme Court rectified that problem. And going forward in the United States, every guilty verdict must be delivered by a unanimous jury in this country. Now, how is your vote so powerful when you're voting not guilty? Well, it does 2 things. It does a lot more things, but I'll just cover 2. It protects against wrongful convictions, and you also have the opportunity to vote not guilty, even if you think the law has been broken, in order to temper the law with mercy and deliver a just verdict when the law itself would deliver an unjust verdict. Now, wrongful convictions, let's just talk quickly about Louisiana, because Louisiana had the 2nd highest exoneration rate in the country, according to the Innocence Project of New Orleans, who in their amicus brief to the Supreme Court brought forth a few figures. They identified 56 exonerations, of which 30 were delivered by juries who had the option of voting not guilty, or of delivering a guilty verdict with a non-unanimous jury. And of those 30, at least 13 known exonerations happened from wrongful convictions delivered by non-unanimous juries. And of those 13 wrongful convictions delivered by non-unanimous juries, 10 of those defendants were Black men. So think about that for a minute. Also, they found that disproportionately, the voices of jurors who were ignored were those of Black jurors and not white jurors. So in correcting this, the Supreme Court has now made it so that each person in the United States who delivers a not guilty verdict, they cannot be overruled by their fellow jurors, by a judge. They cannot be overruled by any government official whatsoever. That is an extraordinarily powerful vote. Second, I'll just quickly cover how you can temper the law with mercy, but by voting not guilty, even if you think that the person you are sitting in judgment of has broken the law. This is a concept commonly known as jury nullification, and it's perfectly legal, although it is also legal for judges to discourage you from doing it and even outright misinstruct you, telling you that you can't do it. Now, why would you want to vote not guilty if someone has broken the law? Well, there are a number of reasons why. Maybe you think that the law is unjust, or perhaps you think that the law is being unjustly applied in a way it wasn't meant to be applied. Perhaps you think that the punishment for breaking this law is unjustly harsh. We see mandatory minimum sentences and 3 strikes laws come into play in a lot of cases, bringing down a really hard hammer for relatively minor offenses just because it triggered these mandatory minimums. Or you may think that a law is generally just, but think that in the case at hand, there are mitigating circumstances that would make strictly enforcing it unjust. So those are a number of reasons why you might want to do that. And looking back in Chicago history, you actually have a very famous musical named after your fine city that is actually about cases of jury nullification. These were cases where, and these were historical cases that the musical is based on, where women were being abused by their husbands and in defense of themselves were killing their husbands. And jurors, instead of finding them guilty because technically they didn't meet the definition of self-defense, they were tempering the law with mercy to prevent these women from being punished for exercising the only option they felt they could use to save themselves. In modern day situations, I'm sure many of you can think of a number of ways you might use this power. Common situations that we're seeing this year are people talking about nullifying drug laws that are disproportionately used against people who have harmed no one, and of those also disproportionately enforced against people of color. We're also seeing a lot of cases, no matter where they are on the political spectrum, of people who are talking about jury nullification in defense of protesters around the country. And I'll just close by mentioning that it's very interesting right now with the COVID-19 pandemic that nationwide courts have shut down trials by jury almost for about 3 months in some places. And even where they're coming online, they're changing the process, making them less fair to defendants. And in some places, we've actually seen courts say they can't see any way to bring back trial by jury, even for criminal trials, until next year. So I hope that everyone will keep an eye on what's going on in their community and defend this right the same way, or even more strenuously than you would defend your own right to vote, because this is your most powerful vote. Thank you.
Oh man, I've never really thought about serving on a jury as voting, but that's totally what it is. I've only been on a jury once. I really tried to get out of it, but when I said you shouldn't pick me because I don't feel comfortable potentially sending a black man to jail, they picked me anyway. Maybe that's good. I don't know. But you may notice that my friend Jorge is not with me right now. And you know why? Because he's going to talk next. And his topic is voting in Spanish. I'm assuming he's talking about the process of voting in Spanish, and not voting in Spanish, which I just looked up is votación. It's all right, Jorge. Here you go, my man.
Well, thank you very much. Video, órale, vamos a hablar de por qué es complicado votar en español en las elecciones de los Estados Unidos, particularmente porque la mitad de los inmigrantes ni siquiera son ciudadanos y la otra mitad ni siquiera hablan inglés. Oh, wait a second. I guess you didn't understand that. Yeah, that's how it feels to vote in the United States when you are a Latino. You don't understand many things, many things. Starting with the language, of course, because the candidates usually start using Google Translation for their political advertising, because candidates never speak about us. It's very rare when a candidate really talks about the issues in the Latino community. And you may attribute it to the fact that not many candidates are Latinos. Obviously, you know, we are the largest minority now in the United States. Apparently, so the numbers say we are the largest ethnic voting bloc after whites in the United States. But that doesn't mean we are fairly represented. And it doesn't mean that our issues are fairly represented in all, you know, levels of office in the United States and all levels of government and politics. And besides, we are not a bloc. Whoever said Latinos are a bloc? I mean, we are people from 24 different countries with many different ideologies. And you have, you know, President Bush being reelected, winning elections in Florida and Texas with 38% of Latinos supporting them. Donald Trump got 23% of the Latino vote. So that's not a block in voting or in anything else. You have to realize that Latinos are as diverse as the Venezuelan folk who came to the United States because he opposed the Bolivarian Revolution. You know, so it's mostly right-wing, mostly probably Donald Trump supporter. But at the same time, that person is an immigrant, and the guy in the White House is completely anti-immigrant. So that creates a very big confusion. On the other hand, you have the person who came to the United States because he was a victim, or she, a victim of the US-backed coup d'etat in Honduras. So you have all kind of Latinos, all kind of politics, all kind of ideologies. So what are we going to do in the 2020 elections? Are we going to vote? Are we going to vote to get rid of the anti-immigrant president in the White House? Well, we wanted Bernie. We wanted Bernie Sanders, but we didn't get him. So now we hate the guy currently in the White House, but we will be forced to vote for the guy who was the right hand of the president who deported more immigrants in the history of the United States, Joe Biden. That's confusing again. So forget even about language, just ideology and politics. You know, who are Latinos expected to vote for? That's a big, big problem. But in the end, I think that elections by themselves, voting in itself, doesn't solve problems. Because if it solved problems, we wouldn't have any problem because we voted in the United States every 2 years. So at this point, we shouldn't have any problems if voting just in itself solves problems. So what are we gonna do in 2020? What we are doing in 2020, just fight, fight, and fight. Fight every day. You know, fight against landlords who are trying to evict people in the middle of the coronavirus crisis, fighting against the bosses who are killing essential workers, basically. You know, the population most affected by COVID in the United States as Latinos, because we are the people harvesting, planting, harvesting, and making food so people who stayed at home can eat. But bosses are killing hundreds of workers every day in the workplace. So we have to fight every day. Fighting against authorities, you know, from the police to ICE. Oh yeah, ICE, immigration and the Border Patrol. If you have heard the news, Trump was just speaking 5 minutes ago from the White House about the Homeland Security agents he's sending to Chicago. Well, those are Border Patrol guys. So we want to defund the police. We want to defund ICE too. So that's what we're doing in 2020. Just fight, fight, and fight every day, you know, in any language. Thank you very much.
I don't know if you you know this about me, but I have a Spanish minor from a second tier public Midwestern college, and you know what I'll say in response to that? Estoy hablando español.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I got. And I'm okay at ordering food in restaurants, but what can you do?
Well, that's pretty good in any case.
Oh, the Spanish speakers that I know, other ones do not agree. But I'm glad that we have so many differing opinions in this world.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
So next up, you know what? You're gonna be very, very surprised because you know what the topic of our next speaker's speech is? It's voting. Our friend Mary Ellen Kasich is going to appear in a recording where she's going to be addressing the science of evolution in your vote. And we're going to watch that right now. That seems like a good thing to do to me.
Oh, take heart, dear citizens, and vote. Can you sense the shift happening now? Can you envision it? Our government, our society, at work for the good of all of us? This nation, our United States of America, was founded on this idea, on this ideal, on this standard of perfection. And although proposed by imperfect men, and although too often we have behaved cruelly and shamefully toward each other, it is nevertheless the ideal to which we aim. Our government is not out there. It's not separate from us. It's not in DC or City Hall, and it's certainly not a big scary something that needs to be dismantled. Our government is meant to be us, all of us. We all do better when we all do better. Isn't that right, the late Paul Wellstone? And before you cynics out there dismiss this as Mr. Potter's sentimental hogwash, take heed and note that the science of evolution is solidly behind our ideal of democracy and all of us taking care of each other. Who among us would disagree that our nation, our whole world, is awash in conflict? Such extremes are shouting at us to pay attention to how far we have strayed from our truest, most basic rule of nature. Where have we gone wrong? Well, here are two myths that underlie our crises, and they are linked.
Myth number one is the myth of scarcity, that there simply is not enough to go around, so we must snatch it up before the next person does. But the truth is that there is plenty of everything, or the know-how to create plenty of everything. You fill in the blank. Plenty of food, of water, of land, of resources, simply profoundly plenty. Myth number two says that in order to survive or to succeed, to prosper, we must compete with each other through conflict with each other, because we are all separate units of life. Both not so. Let's take a quick glance at the science. Since the 1880s, a false Darwinian idea has endured. It said nature's limitations require living organisms to compete to survive. This faulty theory was refuted even in his time. You could see Wallace and Lamarck for that, but it was embraced by those who wanted to stay in power. Why? Because it justified an upper over a lower class, the haves over the have-nots. It led to an us versus them mentality in all areas of government and economy, because it works for those who want to dominate nature and other human beings. But that is the hogwash. It is scientific fact, multiply peer-reviewed, and especially since the 1980s in divergent disciplines, that all of nature is based on the foundational rule of cooperation between organisms and their environment. This is true from the very cellular level to that of humanity. The science of evolution proves it. So if you needed science to uphold your ideals, there it is. But haven't our ancient spiritual traditions and our indigenous cultures always taught us that we are one, that we are connected, and so must cooperate with all of life? Well then, who has been standing in the way of our reaching our aims? Who else? The old guard, those in whom wealth and resources are concentrated. And here is the key, those of who live by old solutions. Those solutions never worked. They cannot work because they are unsustainable. Hence, the chaos we see everywhere. Economies and governments all over the world are failing because they are based on the myths of scarcity and competition to survive. I asked you if you felt the shift happening. Now is the time for that powerful shift. Of course, the old guard will not give up easily. They are digging in their heels to stop the change, but they cannot stop it. People all over the world already have solutions to our crises. This election of Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, will be the turning point for all of us to get to work. But only if everyone who believes votes, and only if we vote for our fellow human beings who share our belief that and our ideal that we are fundamentally connected to and responsible for each other, for the earth and beyond, and all of life. In our nation, it is through our vote that we express this connection, this ideal. Dear citizens, vote because science and spiritual traditions tell you to. Vote because your heart tells you to. Vote because we owe it to each other. So that government of the people, by the people, for the people, will not perish from the earth. Thank you.
Good heavens, Mary Ellen Kasich, that was beautiful. That was my science joke. Who we got up? Who's talking now, Jorge? What's coming up next?
No talking, no talking, no more talking. We're gonna be singing, or well, at least listening to a song, because I believe, you know, every social movement has to produce music, songs. Otherwise, it's not a good social movement. Okay. So now we're gonna hear a song about voting.
Canciones.
Canciones. Anita Kellen and Catherine Thompson recorded a video with a song, VOTE. Go ahead.
We've got a quick intro for you, but I'm looking for my partner, Catherine Thompson. I don't see her.
I'm here, Anita.
Okay,
I'm
there-
excited to be here and very inspired by the afternoon's activities and discussion. This is great.
Yes,
Anita and I are together the creators of Her Story, the 19th Amendment Turns 100, which, as we've heard in earlier conversations, was a law that finally enabled women, primarily white women at that time, to vote. Our show features songs from the movement itself, as well as modern songs that help to convey the story of this decades-long struggle.
Catherine and I had planned to take our 100th anniversary celebration across the state and country in live performances until COVID-19 arrived. But just as the suffragists had to find other ways to continue their work when our country was hit with the Spanish flu of 1918, we've had to find other ways to share their important story during the current pandemic.
And the show must go on. So we've created a pre-recorded, socially distanced virtual version. And we'd love to continue this conversation with you. You can reach us at 19thAmendmentShow@gmail.com.
And we want to thank the Newberry for inviting us to participate in Bughouse 2020. We're delighted to share one song from the show with you, with lyrics especially written for the show and recorded with images from the suffrage movement that we hope will inspire you to do your part on our next election day. Roll the video.
V is for your voice in liberty. Oh, the ones who fought for you and me. T for troublemakers and for tough glass ceiling breakers. E for every time election turnout is sublime. Go vote as if your life depends on it. Vote, 'cause Russian hackers don't want it. Democracy needs our support. You know it's not a spectator sport, so vote. Do it for you and me. V for valiant women everywhere. O for only seeking what is fair. T for triumph despite decades of an uphill fight. E for every eager suffragist and high achiever. Vote, stand up, be counted, don't be late. Don't sit home while others choose your fate. Democracy needs our support. You know it's not a spectator sport. Now vote. Do it for you and me. Vote. Do it for you and me.
Bravo. Hey, what language is bravo? I say that every once in a while. I don't even know where that comes from. I want to say
Bravo.
Italian. That sounds
Spanish.
That's Spanish
Bravo,
too?
bravura, of
Okay.
course. Man,
I just say it's romantic.
you're living in the country with the second largest Spanish-speaking population. You have to fine-tune your Spanish, no doubt. But thank you very much. That was an incredible song. I think. Well, now it's dude, your turn. You know.
Yeah. So up next is my friend Georgina Valverde of the Society of Smallness, and she's going to be accompanied by Dr. Ernesto Guzman in her pre-recorded piece. And it says he's an entomologist, and I looked that up, and that means he studies bugs. insects, I think is the correct term. But let's learn what would happen if insects could vote.
Fellow humanoids, I'm Georgina with Society. Hello, fellow humanoids. I'm Georgina with Society of Smallness, and today I'm stepping on a soapbox with insects and with an entomologist. His name is Dr. Ernesto Guzman. He is a professor and the director of the Center for Honeybee Research at the University of Guelph in Canada. I want to advocate for insects because they're super important. They're at the base of the food chain, and if you're not for insects, regardless of your political ideas, then we're all doomed.
So let's get to our question. If insects could vote, what would they vote for?
If insects could vote, particularly bees, they would say use less pesticides in agricultural settings, use less pesticides in home, use less pesticides in your gardens. Our concern is mostly with pesticides called insecticides. Some are synthetic, some are natural, but most of them are nerve toxins. What that is they kill the insect by affecting their nervous system, and they die out of paralysis.
What happens to an insect when it's exposed to a pesticide?
Well, what happens is that they cannot coordinate their movements. They cannot walk. In the case of bees, they cannot fly, drop on the ground, crawl on the ground, expel their stomach contents, that is, they vomit the nectar they collected in flowers, and they eventually die.
There are some relatively new pesticides called neonicotinoids that are very problematic.
Initially, they were very convenient. They were developed in the late 90s, and little by little they were adopted by growers and farmers all over the world. Today, they are the most widely used insecticide. The toxin that kills insects, it's a toxin similar to that of nicotine in tobacco. That's why they call them neonicotinoids. The particular way they function is that they are systemic. Most of the time, these insecticides are coated on seeds, and when the seeds are planted and the plant starts to grow from the seed, the insecticide travels through all tissues of the plant. And so when a pest bites or eats a piece of leaf or a root of that plant, perish because it's exposed to the insecticide. The problem with these neonicotinoids is that even when they're practical, because the farmers don't have to spray it. They just plant the seed and it already contains the insecticide. But 90% of the insecticides doesn't stay on the plant. 90% of the insecticide stays in the environment, in the soil. When they plant the seeds and dust is released from the machines that the farmers use, there are high levels of these pesticides in that dust. And if they land on flowers visited by bees, they can kill them right away. That's an acute toxicity. But in most cases, bees are exposed to sublethal doses of the insecticides because they gather it from pollen and nectar that they use to feed their larvae. And in the long term, it doesn't kill the bees, but it shortens the life of the bee, affects the immune system of the bee, impairing the bee from defending of other diseases and parasites, and also affect their behavior. For example, a study that we conducted last year, we found that it reduces its foraging behavior, that is the ability of the bees to gather pollen and nectar. By reducing that behavior, the bees collect less food for their colony. The colony remains weak and may perish in the winter time. And also affects their memory. When it affects their memory, bees visiting flowers forget the way back home.
They're amazing animals. Well, let's wrap up. What kind of agricultural practices would insects, but especially bees, recommend?
They would vote for more organic practices, or they would tell people consume local honey. Because by buying local honey, you're supporting a local beekeeper. And beekeepers are the people who maintain bee populations alive.
I've been in that garden. That's Georgina's garden, and I promise you that there is no shortage of insects in that and all of that lovely foliage. And should insects get the right to vote in I guess 2024 would be the first time that would happen. But they should make Georgina's backyard a polling place. Like, that's a pretty high traffic spot right there.
They should have the right to vote. Everybody should have the right to vote. You know, immigration laws were actually passed in order to prevent immigrants from voting, because it used to be that anyone in the United States could vote. That would include insects too. But the laws were made to exclude immigrants from voting. It happens. That's the way it goes. But let me introduce the next speaker, Andrew Silva, who's going to talk about a very interesting thing. Who do you like best, and who do you like second, and who do you like third in an election? Not just yes or no, but 1, 2, 3, 4. What are my preferences in the election? Andrew Silva, ranked choice voting, a simple, proven upgrade. Go ahead.
Okay, one moment.
We'll wait for you.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. So this talk is really about choice. And, you know, we want democracy around the world. We want everyone to have a choice in how they're governed. Unfortunately, in some countries, there is no voting. You are told who's in charge, whether you like them or not, and you're stuck with it. You essentially have one choice. Luckily, we live in the United States. We have a flourishing democracy, and we get two choices. Two choices. I mean, we act like this is normal, and I know this is a little bit of a joke, but so is the way we vote. And why is this? It is because we use plurality voting. So the most votes wins, which sounds normal, but there's no need to get a majority of the support. You could win with less than 50% of the vote, and this happens actually all the time. And what this causes is we get two major parties, and slowly they move farther and farther and farther apart. So just looking at the last presidential election in 2016, 13 states were won without a majority. So less than 50% of the votes cast in these states voted for the winner. So if I want choices, there must be a better way to vote. And luckily there is, and it's been used around the US and it's taking off. It's already used statewide in Maine. It's used in several places for primaries, Alaska, Hawaii, Nevada, Wyoming, Kansas, in this year's elections. It's used in a bunch of cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, San Francisco, Oakland, Santa Fe, Cambridge. It got approved to start being used next year in New York City. Harvard University uses it for their campus elections. So does MIT. So do colleges and universities, 70 plus in states all across the US. So this is already happening, and it's happening because it's simple and it works. And as the introduction kind of alluded to, it's called ranked choice voting. So ranked choice voting is just a simple upgrade to the way we vote. So today, when you go to vote, you go to the ballot box and you pick a single candidate. So your ballot might look like this. You select the candidate you like. With ranked choice voting, you rank your candidates. First choice, second choice, third choice, down the list, any order you like. It's really that simple. We already know how to rank everything. That's how it works. And it has lots of advantages. One big one is it guarantees that we have a majority of support. Whoever wins gets supported by a majority of the voters. It eliminates the spoiler effect. So you could vote for who you want first, And if they don't win, okay, your vote might get transferred to your second choice. No more feeling like you're throwing away your vote. No more feeling like you're spoiling the election. And it gives us a lot more choices. So a lot more people could run, especially since there's not this spoiler effect. And there's lots of other benefits. Better representation, campaigns become a lot more civil. Often it leads to higher voter turnouts and can even save money. So this is in fact progressing in Illinois. There are 2 bills already in the Illinois Senate and House, SB 2267 and 5585, which would bring ranked choice voting to state elections in Illinois. So I'm actually advocating on behalf of Fair Vote Illinois. We advocate for ranked choice voting. And we know that we will actually get these bills to pass, and we will win ranked choice voting in Illinois and throughout the US by showing a lot of support. The biggest barrier right now is some people haven't heard of ranked choice voting, and as they hear more about it, they tend to support it. So what is the choice? You know, we could just keep going like we're going and hope for the best, or we could upgrade the way we vote. We could change the system and we could have more choice, a less polarized system that we could all work with. So I hope that you join us, sign up on fairvoteillinois.org, my shameless plug, and really the choice is yours. Thank you.
Daffy Duck was robbed, in my opinion. That's the way that the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame does their voting. You get a first choice and a second choice and a third choice. Sounds like a good plan to me. Got Harold Baines in there.
Definitely yes. You know, it's who do I like best and who do I like least, and you know, we'll give you some choices.
Choices are nice. I like having those. You know what we don't have right now? We don't have a choice about what we're seeing
democracy,
right
you
now.
know, choosing choices, yeah.
Because right now we're going to hear from. Are we hearing from Kate Thomas? Is that who we're hearing from right now? I believe that we are. Oh, next up is Robert. I'm sorry. Oh, Robert Middlecoff, you're right there. Why didn't I say Robert Middlecoff? I was going to talk about. I'm a little confused with what the order is. Robert Middlecoff, what are you going to talk about for us?
I'm also talking about ranked choice voting today, but I'm going to tell a little story about one of the states Andrew mentioned, which is Maine.
Oh, well, here, let me do that again. Robert Middlecoff is also going to speak about ranked choice voting. How about that fantastic recovery?
Second best choice.
Right, take it away, man.
All right, so like Andrew mentioned, Maine is the only state that currently has ranked choice voting statewide. And I know you already explained how awesome it is, and so I'm going to talk about how did Maine make this happen. You know, we don't typically hear of Maine being in the forefront of reforming or referendums like California is, but what's going on over there? And so I'm going to tell a little story that starts in 1974 with a guy named James Longley. And this guy is one of the first independent governors to win office in Maine. He was really a Democrat originally, but he decided he actually missed the deadline to file to become a Democrat. And so he said, you know what, I'm just going to run as an independent. And people didn't really take him seriously until he got an endorsement from the major newspaper. And he ended up winning as an independent. He beat both the Democrat and the Republican. But what was a little unfortunate about his election is he only won 39% of the vote. So 60% of people in Maine said, you know what, I don't like this guy, I want somebody else. But he went on to win. He was actually a pretty popular governor, and he only served one term, and Maine moved on. And it wasn't really until 1994 that Maine faced another issue like this, when Angus King, who's the current senator in Maine, also an independent, won the governorship again. So you have a second independent in Maine, but he only won 35% of the vote. So 65% of people voted for somebody else. And so, you know, Mainers, for whatever reason, have decided, you know, they're comfortable with voting for independents. they're not as worried about tactical voting, you know, worrying that, oh, what if the Republican gets elected if I elect the Democrat? So they've had this history of independent voting and being afraid of, not being afraid of voting for independents. But this went on to burn Maine later. So, you know, they went in 2006, they ended up electing a Democrat, a guy named John Baldacci, with 38% of the vote. And then what really made this bad for Maine was they elected a guy named Paul LePage with 37% of the vote. And so they have this long history of more than 60% of people electing their governor in Maine. And this worked out pretty well until Paul LePage, who was a guy who was really unpopular. He had about a 41% approval rate at one time. And what was really bad is he vetoed 624 bills that the Maine legislature passed. So you think about it, not only did 63% of people not vote for this guy, but their legislatures that they did vote for passed 624 bills that this guy said, nope, I don't like that. And he broke the record for vetoes. The guy who held the record before was that independent James Longley I mentioned, who had 118 vetoes. So this was really the last straw for Mainers. And if you go to this guy's Wikipedia page, you'll see lots of racist stuff he said, really not a nice guy. And Mainers said, you know what? I think this happened because only 37% of people voted for this guy. This isn't fair. This isn't working for us. And so Mainers started to get to work and they said, all right, let's fix this. Let's institute ranked choice voting in Maine so this never happens again. We never want to have another Paul LePage be our governor. And so for the next 6 years, they worked to get this referendum on the ballot. And in 2016, they passed ranked choice voting in Maine. And they're the first state to do this. And this is what really inspired me to get involved in this issue in 2016. And that's when Fair Vote Illinois, the Illinois chapter of Fair Vote was founded. Because I said, you know what, if they can do it, we can do it. And so over the past 4 years, Fair Vote Illinois has been working to make ranked choice voting happen here. And like Andrew said, go to our website and sign up. We're really, at this point, just trying to spread the movement because it's not well known. But I have one success story for Maine. Since they implemented this in 2016, in 2018, people were able to use ranked choice voting in the 2nd congressional district, and it flipped the seat. So one guy, the Republican, won 46.3% of the vote in the first round. And in normal voting, he would have won and it would have been over. But when 15,000 voters were allowed to have a second chance and change their vote from an independent to their second choice, and so 15,000 voters got to have a second chance. And that flipped the seat. And the winner, the current representative in Congress, now has 50% of the vote or majority support. So that's my success story in Maine. And let's make this happen in Illinois.
I don't know if you're reading the comments in the chat right now, but Matt brought up a good point. How are people from Maine not called maniacs instead of Mainers? That I never thought about that before, but that's the kind of thing that needs to be put to vote. Maniac is definitely my top choice. Mainers would be down underneath. Main lines, that's okay right there. I don't know. Top choice, definitely Maniac though.
That's fine. As long as they keep voting the way they are voting, I wouldn't oppose that. Let's everybody become a maniac, you know. Maybe we should follow the example. Everybody's a maniac, or should be. But let's move on. Next, our panelist is Marcos Herrera. And notice that I don't say Marcos Herrera, but Marcos Herrera, who seems to be the only one who understood everything I said. But go ahead, Marcos, you got it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I am affiliated with the Society of Smallness and also with the Newberry Library, but my thoughts here do not reflect those of the Newberry Library or the Society of Smallness. I must say that right away. I have a few musical post-it notes and physical gesturations to convey my thoughts. And also a bleep to make it go down better. All right, so Look around. Everywhere you turn, there's heartache. It's everywhere that we go. You can try everything you can to escape the painful life that we know. When all else fails and you long to see something better than we have today, I know some way where you can have your say. It's called the mail-in vote. You have your day, so come on, vote. Let our world grow with a Joe. You know you can do it. Post-it note number 2. Well, it makes some difference if you're black or white, if you're a Karen or Putin. Post-it note number 3. Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King, bring us back uniting things. Mitch McConnell, William Barr, oh my God, you've gone too far. Maxine Waters, Warren Liz, women with a potent fizz. AOC sending flares, Bernie Sanders has great hair. Mitten Justin, saving grace, Bernie Sanders gave great race. Black Lives Matter, of course they do. Lincoln Project 2. Donald Trump impeached you. Progressives with great attitude, Republicrats are in the mood. Don't just stand there, let's get to it. Cast your vote, there's nothing to it. Vote. Move over, whiny Twitter, come on, vote. Let your voting go with the Joe. You know you can do it. I have a few more post-it notes. And also, and love from Mexico. One of which reads, it's the United States of America. Remember the unity part. Also, empathetic, intelligent leadership. Now, God made science and data too. We love you. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you so much for listening to my thoughts.
Yeah, that's that weird Bughouse. That's that Bughouse weirdness right there. There's one
malfunction
that he was mentioned there that kind of stuck with me though, and that was talking about mail-in voting. And I don't know about y'all in Chicago, but my mail has been super strange and inconsistent over the past few months. Like some days, I'll go like 2 or 3 days without getting mail, and then like 3 different mail trucks will come on the same day. And I just don't understand how that's working. But you know what is amazingly consistent? Every day, every single day at 5:30, the ice cream truck comes by playing Turkey in the Straw. Every single day, without fail, rain or shine. And you see what I did there? That's a segue into this next pre-recorded piece by Kate Thomas. That's called Ice Cream and Voting. How'd I do, Jorge?
Fantastic. You know, despite the wardrobe malfunction.
All right, let's hear it from Kate. I'm interested in what's going to happen here.
Let's go with the ice cream, definitely. You know, Mexicans love it. Paletas in the street. Go ahead.
All right, it's good to rehearse. Okay, we recording? Hi, everybody. We're here at the Dairy Star on Devon Shake Split Sundays Kosher Ice Cream. Yes, today is ice cream day. People are sitting outside enjoying a nice cool shake. I'm here with Leo and Henry, 2 juniors at Jones High School. can't go back to school in the fall, but here we are, having ice cream. We're here to talk about voting. Thinking about voting. Does it matter if we vote? Who cares if you go and vote? Why should we even bother? By the way, I'm eating a very small ice cream because I'm a member of the Society of Smallness.
Well, you asked whether it's important that we vote. Yes, I would say it is. I think that we have a democracy, and I don't really think our democracy is a democracy if people don't vote in it, right? The point is that decisions are made by the people, for the people, and if people don't make the decisions, it doesn't matter that they have the opportunity to vote. Like, if they're not voting, then we don't have a democracy.
But, by the way, what are you drinking?
A shake.
What flavor?
Beer.
Is it good?
Tastes like voting.
Oh, did I bribe you?
Maybe.
Could we have voting that involves bribing? I mean, like, I would say incentivizing voting with ice cream. Could we incentivize voting with ice cream?
Well, you know, back in the old days, before we had a strong federal government, mayoral elections would just be determined, like, people would go, there's a garbage truck making a lot of noise. People would go to the, like, wherever you vote. I don't know, the city hall, and the political candidates would be giving out drinks and saying, hey, you should vote for me and I'll buy you a beer. And that used to be the standard. I know this is different. This is just the idea of voting, period, not voting for a specific candidate. But, like, that is something that was done in America for a while.
But what if you just flat out got ice cream, regardless of who you were voting for, but there was just ice cream at the end of your vote?
Who's going to pay for it?
The federal government.
The federal government? With what money?
There's an ice cream tax.
There's an ice cream tax. How much? Elections aren't even controlled by the federal government, are they? I'm pretty sure it's a state-by-state thing. Just each state runs their elections differently.
Well, what if there was an ice cream tax regardless of what level of government we were voting for?
Ice cream tax. Okay. Yeah. Every time. Okay. But then you're just paying for your own ice cream.
Yeah, but at least you have something to look forward to after you cast your vote. Because sometimes people feel like, why should I go to the polling station? It's too much work.
Well, sure it's work. Okay, well, then we have mail-in ballots. I think mail-in ballots are a good solution to that. It's more convenient. You don't have to leave your house. You just check the boxes, do the thing, and then it's done. You can't complain that, oh, I had to leave my house. How terrible.
Yeah, I think that's true. Sitting at home at your computer, which my son often does. Would you vote from home on your computer, Henry?
I'd go to the ballots in person.
Is there anything that would keep you from voting?
I mean, coronavirus.
Ooh.
I would want to make sure that the like ballot, like the voting places, I don't know what you call them, polling stations. There you go. That polling stations are safe and that workers are wearing masks. And like, if you're standing in line and you're going through the same places like that people are going before you, I would want to make sure that all the other people voting are wearing masks. Like, just even going out at all can be kind of a health risk. So that's something that could stop me from voting.
But what about the Russians?
What about the Russians?
What if they're tampering with our votes? So why even bother voting when you know essentially the Russians are deciding how this election is going to turn out?
Principle. Yeah.
So, also, what about the idea that when you buy things, you're voting? You're voting all the time. It's not just on election day.
Well, yeah. You vote with your money, right? Whatever you pay for, you're giving them money to do more of what you paid them for. Like marketing teams and analytics people pay attention to that kind of stuff. And if there's more sales on whatever product, the company is going to make more of that product because that's you're voting with your money. So I guess that is. Boycotts are bad.
Yeah. What's cancel culture?
Cancel culture?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting how I don't know, holding people accountable for things that they have said and done has become such an anomalous type of thought that they came up with a name for it. Cancel culture is just like, you did something bad should happen. That's not nothing new. Like, why is there a name for that now? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
Well, Mexico had a very interesting experience. Political candidates were giving tortas, sandwiches to voters. If you vote for me, you will get a sandwich. That's strictly forbidden now. So maybe we shouldn't start with the ice cream thing. But nevertheless, let's go to the next one. Vote or not to vote? I don't think that's a question. We're going to hear from our last panelist, Calvin Gibbs. Calvin, are you ready? Not voting, then I don't want to hear about it. I guess yes, everybody should vote.
Yes, sir, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Calvin, go ahead. All yours.
Very good. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone from the Newberry Library, all of the participants and the organizers for this event. It's been a great afternoon of speeches, ideas, and suggestions. I want to talk about the upcoming votes, the upcoming elections. At the 2016 election, the next morning, I was kind of shell-shocked and went to McDonald's to sit down for breakfast, and two young ladies across from me were laughing and joking about they had just turned 18 and they didn't vote. They were laughing and giggling, and I felt pretty bad for them. And I remember them even now, 3.5 years later. Over this last 3.5 years, I've heard so many people complaining, listening to this side of the aisle and this side of the aisle, and this is not right, and this could be done different. Well, guess what? If you're not voting, then I don't want to hear about it. To fight this coronavirus epidemic, we need strong leadership that cares about the lives of the American people. And I mean, not just the economic growth, but poll numbers and re-election strategies. That's all fine. But let's have the health and the well-being of our citizens be number one. The education of our children is paramount, and safety of our way of life. It's apparent that this current president has no sense of what the people are going through during this pandemic and the resulting economic collapse. It's just like he can't relate in any way. You see, we need to get back to having compassion for each other. We need to love each other. As Mother Teresa once said, love is the beginning of change. We must love our country, and we must love the freedoms that are supposed to come with that, and love it enough to make change. We must look out for each other. We must help each other. We must help our brothers and sisters no matter what color, what religion they are. Because when we do this, we help ourselves, because it's in these moments that we make our country stronger. Now, we have started as a country to move in the right direction to combat police brutality, racial inequality, despite the direction of our government. Wrong is wrong every day. I don't care what you say. Wrong is wrong, and we must continue to have conversations. We must continue to organize and make sure that once and for all, we can crush the head of this evil wrong called inequality. Black Lives Matter, yes, that's true indeed. but indeed all lives matter too. Now, if you're not going to vote, then I don't want to hear you complaining about how things are not getting any better, how things have gotten worse, because you're not a part of the solution. You're a part of the problem. You see, we must vote not only for the executive branch or the president, we must vote for the legislative branch, which is our state and local representatives. We must vote for the judicial, which is our judges. And we also must vote for our schools and community leaders. We must change also, and I heard this in a previous panelist a few minutes ago, talk about changing the way votes are done. Fair Vote Illinois seems very interesting, but the winner of take-all electoral college system, it must be changed. It's not fair, and so that all voters in all 50 states have a say in choosing our next leader for this country. And if you're not voting, then I don't want to hear it. Thank you.
I saw my man Jorge put his mask on between the last speakers, so I've done the whole thing. See how easy this is? It's not difficult at all. I have it on. That wasn't an issue at all.
It is not difficult at all. And voting is not that difficult. Well, wait a second. It is very difficult sometimes. Yes.
We look cool as hell. Anybody who is complaining about wearing a mask just doesn't have a cool enough mask, in my opinion.
Right. Right. And we don't get to vote for that. You know, it's social consciousness. We don't need to go to vote to wear a mask. So everybody should go wearing a mask.
Mask up, folks. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the open speaker segment of Bughouse Square. I mean, I know that we weren't outside in the sunshine, but a plus side of all this is it rained a little bit right there. So, and I think most of us are dry, so that's pretty nice. We got that going for us. I think this is called optimism. It's a new thing that I'm trying out.
And that's good. You know, there's got to be an end to this, but of course, I hope we don't go to what we used to call normal. We have to come back to a new normal, you know, back to the future kind of thing. Go back to a non-normal situation, non-normal society. And part of it is going to be voting, I guess. So vote if you can. If you can't, try. And try twice and try 3 times. Try voting. It's going to be a big decision this year, of course. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the speakers. The list is very long to repeat everybody's name, but just thank you, everyone who participated this year in the SOAPBOXes. Thanks.
I know that you can only hear me clapping right now, but this is me clapping for, and pretend that there's like 1,000 of me clapping for everyone that spoke today. Like a deafening sound ruining your hearing in celebration.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dud. Thank you, Jorge. And thank you to all of our SOAPBOX speakers. To cap off the celebration, we are going to take you back to the Newberry. So here is the 3rd performance by Philip Armstrong and Greg Woods of Mosaic Soul Ensemble, performing another song from IWW's Little Red Songbook, Ancient Jewish Lullaby, which was adapted from Yiddish by labor activist Mary Gallagher. We hope you enjoy this final performance. Thanks for joining us.
The light of peace when you
child for that happy morn. Yet there will be for all a bright tomorrow. Work, my child, for that happy morn. Work and love your failing brother while you sing a song of peace. When workers clasp hands with each other, then the world will be at peace. When workers clasp hands with each other, then the world will be at peace. When workers clasp hands with each other, then the whole world will be at
Thank you to Philip Armstrong and Greg Woods for that. We're going to wrap up Bughouse 2020 with a heartfelt thanks. Thanks for the hard work of the Bughouse Organizing Committee, the Society of Smallness, GCE Lab School, and the Washington Square Park Advisory Council. This was a huge team effort, and we're grateful for your dedication. Thank you to our speakers for sharing your passionate speeches. Your messages were heard. I want to remind you now in the closing moments of this event to remember to vote this November. You can check out Chicago Votes, Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, Rock the Vote, and vote.org. You can go to all these websites for information, links to voter registrations, and more. We look forward to welcoming visitors back to the Newberry as soon as it is safe to do. But in the meantime, please check back in August when we'll be debuting our fall programming series. You'll be able to see what's available and register for programs on our website, newberry.org. I'll leave you now. Have a lovely afternoon, and please remember to vote. Bye now.
Bye.